Chapter 840. Re-entering Baiyang Town, Zhuwen formed a seal with both hands, and surging origin energy surged into the Azure Dragon token. Immediately, a white light erupted from the token, and the small universe formation within it was completely activated by Zhuwen. The white light became even more intense, and in the end, it enveloped Zhuwen, the surrounding Zhuo family members, Lve Tao, and the others. Then, everyone disappeared without a trace in the white light. This was an empty hall. The ground was filled with strong clouds and mist, and the top of the hall was an oval-shaped dome filled with stars. If one did not look carefully, they might think that it was a real starry sky. This was the interior of the Azure Dragon Hall. After Zhuwen passed the first heaven and earth test, he had the qualifications to enter the hall with the Azure Dragon token. At this moment, Lve Tao, Luo Xing, Qing Lian, and the members of the Zhuo family were all looking around the hall in confusion. Their eyes revealed a trace of surprise. Where is this place? The origin energy inside is so dense. Moreover, I can also feel that within the dense origin energy, there is an extremely strange and intense energy that is nourishing my meridians. Lve Tao's eyes revealed a strange expression. After feeling the surging origin energy, he could not help but exclaim. The expressions on the faces of the others were similar to Lve Tao's. Then their gazes all gathered on Zhuwen. The one who brought them here was Zhuwen, and they knew that Zhuwen definitely knew the reason. Seeing the gazes of the crowd, Zhuwen no longer hid anything. He briefly explained the matter of the dragon vein. At the same time, he also gave a brief introduction of the Azure Dragon Hall. As Zhuwen explained, Zhuo Xiangding, Lve Tao, and the others became more and more shocked. They finally knew why Zhuwen had advanced so quickly. It turned out that the dragon vein was a blessing in disguise. You said that the master of the Azure Dragon Hall is a saint? And the Azure Dragon Hall itself is a Holy Spirit treasure? Zhuo Xiangding was still in disbelief, and could not help but ask. Zhuwen nodded and said, "The master of the Azure Dragon Hall, the Azure Dragon Taoist, is indeed a saint, and an extremely terrifying one at that. Although I have the Azure Dragon token, I only have 3 chances to enter and exit the Azure Dragon Hall. Now that I have used one, there are only 2 chances left. The Azure Dragon Hall contains the source of the Azure Dragon, and the origin energy is much denser than the outside world. It is extremely beneficial for cultivation. Furthermore, this Azure Dragon Palace is also very secretive. You guys are also very safe here." At that time, the Azure Dragon Hall, the Azure Dragon Hall, the Azure Dragon Hall. At that time of the Azure Dragon Hall. At the Azure Dragon Hall, Zhuwen Hall Hall, Zhuwen Hall Hall Hall, Zhuwen Hall Zhuwen. All of you stay in the Azure Dragon Palace first. I still need to make a trip to the outside world. Of Zhuing Lu, of Yi of Emperor, and of the Emperor. Also, I must find out the whereabouts of my father." Zhuwen continued. Zhuo Xiangding walked up to Zhuwen, patted his shoulder and said, "The imperial capital is in turmoil right now. Zhuwen, be careful." Zhuwen smiled and said, "Don't worry, grandfather. I have the 100 transformation divine art, and can change my appearance and aura. Even if the Blue Dragon Hall and Emperor Qing want to arrest me, I'm not afraid." After saying that, Zhuwen nodded to Lve Tao, Luo Xing, and Qing Lian. Then, he took out the Azure Dragon token, and turned into a white light, disappearing from the hall. Looking at the disappearing figure of Zhuwen, everyone in the hall had a hint of worry on their faces. Although they knew that the current Zhuwen was no longer the same as before, the power of the Blue Dragon Hall and Emperor Qing was too great. It was difficult for Zhuwen to do anything alone. If it was a head-on clash, Zhuwen would not be a match for the former. "Everyone, let's cultivate in the Azure Dragon Hall first. We are too weak. If we can increase our strength, it will be helpful to Zhuwen in the future." Zhuo Xiangding suddenly spoke, and everyone nodded in agreement. Although they were still worried in their hearts, it was more of a desire to become stronger. The reason why they were bullied by others was because they were too weak. If they were powerful, the Blue Dragon Hall would not dare to touch them. At the end of the day, it was because they were too weak. The vitality in the Azure Dragon Hall was very rich. Because of the origin of the Azure Dragon, It was much easier for them to cultivate here than in the outside world. Outside the imperial capital, a middle-aged man with a sallow complexion stood quietly on a rock. He looked at the imperial capital in front of him with a sharp gaze. Emperor Qing and the Blue Dragon Hall are too strong. It's impossible for me to break into the imperial capital's dungeon alone. It seems that I need to see Elder Shiwan. Zhuowen muttered in a low voice. He did not rush toward the imperial capital. Instead, he flew in the opposite direction. The direction he was heading was Baiyang Town, where the Arcane Guild was located. Baiyang Town was still the same as before. It was full of tranquility and peace. Arcanists in robes were constantly coming in and out of Baiyang Town. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He put on the Arcanist's robe and entered Baiyang Town naturally. Zhuowen walked along the bustling streets toward the Arcane Guild at the front. He soon arrived in front of the tower-like building. This building was the headquarters of the Arcane Guild. Stop right there. Only 4th-grade Arcanists are qualified to enter the headquarters of the Arcane Guild. You're just a 3rd-grade Arcanist. Don't join in the fun. A lazy young man stood at the entrance of the headquarters. This young man was also a 3rd-grade Arcanist. He saw that Zhuowen's Arcanist's robe only had the 3rd-grade symbol drawn on it. There was a touch of disdain in his eyes, and he directly rejected Zhuowen at the door. Zhuowen's current appearance was that of a sickly middle-aged man. But he was only a 3rd-grade Arcanist. This young man naturally had a look of disdain on his face. His attitude was even a little arrogant. Zhuowen frowned slightly. He did not expect the headquarters of the Arcane Guild to have such a requirement. When he first entered, he was led in by Elder Shiwan. At that time, he was naturally unimpeded, so he did not know about this rule. I have something to discuss with Elder Shiwan. Please inform him. Although the attitude of the young man in front of him made Zhuowen unhappy, he did not want to cause trouble. Therefore, he could only let the young man go in and inform him. As long as Elder Shiwan came out, everything would be fine. You're looking for Elder Shiwan? The young man stared and looked Zhuowen up and down. However, he sneered and said, Who do you think you are? Elder Shiwan is the founder of our Arcane Guild. He has a high status. How can a small fry like you meet him? Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and said indifferently, You just need to inform Elder Shiwan. Then, you'll know whether I'm qualified to meet him or not. The young man's eyes became even more disdainful. He made up his mind that the middle-aged man in front of him was probably here to cause trouble. Therefore, his tone became unfriendly. Get lost. Elder Shiwan is not someone like you can meet. Zhuowen's face was slightly unpleasant. This young man guarding the door did not know what was good for him. He did not even let him inform him. Then, can you inform the other elders? Zhuowen's voice became a little cold. The young man's mocking smile became even more intense. He said, I've said it before. Who do you think you are? Do you think you can meet the other elders? Get lost as soon as possible. Okay. Zhuowen, on the other hand, was so angry that he began to laugh. A frightening amount of consciousness energy surged out, and the smile on the young man's face froze. His eyes widened in shock. Wasn't this middle-aged man a rank 3 Arcana Master? Why was his mind power so terrifying? Get lost. I have something to discuss with Elder Shiwan. Zhuowen shouted coldly. His mental power surged out of his body, forcing the youth to stumble backward. The youth fell on his butt in the guild hall. Meanwhile, Zhuowen had already stepped into the guild hall. The scene of the young man suddenly sitting on the ground and a strange middle-aged man barging into the hall was naturally seen by the other Arcanists in the guild. Many of them even showed a hint of mockery when they saw the young man's sorry state. This young man was the 9th Elder's honorary disciple, and he was quite talented as well. He relied on the 9th Elder's name to strut around in the guild as a mere rank 3 Arcana Master, causing quite a few Arcana Masters to loathe him. Because of the 9th Elder, many grade 4 Arcanists with no background in the guild had to do things according to this young man's wishes. They were usually very aggrieved. Now that they saw the young man being humiliated, many Arcanists in the hall were secretly delighted. However, when these Arcanists saw that the person who barged in was only a grade 3 Arcanist, a strange expression appeared on their faces. It seemed that this middle-aged man who barged into the guild really did not know the rules at all. They were afraid that he would suffer a great loss. How dare you barge into the guild? Men, take this person down and wait for the elder to deal with him. Looking at the mocking gazes from around him, the young man flew into a rage out of humiliation. His face turned green and white as he shouted in the hall. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. A group of arcanists in silver robes came into the hall and surrounded Zhuowen. The middle-aged man in the lead glanced at the young man indifferently and immediately asked, "What happened?" The young man hurriedly came to the side of the middle-aged man in silver robes and pointed at Zhuowen. "Chief Xing, this person barged into the guild and injured me without permission. He disregarded the rules of the Arcana Guild and ran amok." The middle-aged man nodded and stared at Zhuowen. "You barged into the guild. What else do you have to say? If you surrender now, I can be lenient with you. You haven't asked me the specific reason, and you already believe this person's one-sided story?" Zhuowen suddenly said, somewhat amused. From the conversation between the young man and the middle-aged man in silver robes, the two were probably quite familiar with each other. This silver-robed man was obviously helping this young man. "You still dare to talk back? A rebellious fellow like you. The life of a prisoner is more suitable for you. Men, take this person down directly." The middle-aged man in silver robes had a sinister look in his eyes. With a wave of his right hand, the silver-robed guards behind him immediately erupted with terrifying mind power and rushed towards Zhuowen, wanting to completely capture Zhuowen. Ignorant. Chapter 841. Seeing Elder Shiwan again looking at the group of silver-robed guards who were instantly repelled, many of the surrounding people were shocked. These silver-robed guards were the patrolling guards of the Arcane Guild. They were extremely strong, and basically all of them had a cultivation of level 4 lower spiritual power. Even so, they were repelled by the sickly middle-aged man in front of them in one move. This person was too terrifying. Moreover, judging from the strength displayed by this middle-aged man, he was probably not just a level 3 arcanist, but at least a level 4 arcanist. The young man's pupils shrank. When the silver-robed guards were defeated in an instant, he knew that the middle-aged man in front of him had been hiding his cultivation. However, he was proud and arrogant, and naturally would not give up just like that. "You've got guts. How dare you hit people in the Arcane Guild? Chief Xing, this person is arrogant and lawless. We must take him down." The young man's words were righteous and impassioned, but he quickly took a step back and hid behind the silver-robed middle-aged man. The young man's little action was naturally noticed by the Chief Xing, but he did not care. Instead, he stared indifferently at Zhuowen and said, "What else do you have to say? You hit our guards in the Arcane Guild. Don't even think about leaving. I don't want to have a conflict with you. I'm here to look for Elder Shiwan. As long as I call Elder Shiwan out, everything will be settled." Zhuowen said lightly, "Nonsense. You're spouting nonsense. Elder Shiwan is not someone like you can meet. How dare you threaten to meet Elder Shiwan after hitting people from the Arcane Guild? I think you must have eaten a leopard's guts." The young man shouted again. Shaking his head, Zhuowen did not want to make a fuss anymore. Instead, he took out the second elder's token and waved it at the silver-robed man. He said, "This is the second elder's token. My identity is the second elder of the Arcane Guild. Do you think I'm qualified to meet Elder Shiwan?" As soon as the token was taken out, the hall suddenly fell silent. Everyone looked at the middle-aged man in front of them with shock in their eyes. They did not expect that the sickly middle-aged man in front of them was actually the second elder of the Arcane Guild, second only to Elder Shiwan. The original second elder was Elder Lu Li, but Elder Lu Li was later defeated by a young man. Since then, the young man had replaced Elder Lu Li as the second elder. However, the new second elder had not appeared for a long time, and everyone gradually forgot that there was still a second elder in the Arcane Guild. Now that this sallow-faced middle-aged man had taken out the second elder's token, he was most likely the new second elder, who hadn't shown himself for a long time. The silver-robed middle-aged man was also stunned. The surprise in his eyes was even denser than the others. "How dare you? How dare you pretend to be the second elder? I've heard from my master that the new second elder is a young man in his early 20s. But you're already middle-aged. So how can you be the second elder? Chief Xing, don't be fooled by him. The token in his hand is definitely fake. In the originally silent hall, the young man jumped out again and pointed at Zhuowen with his right hand. His eyes were full of disbelief. After all, he was the unofficial disciple of the ninth elder and knew the characteristics of the mysterious second elder. The sallow middle-aged man in front of him could not be the second elder. Oh, it's a fake. The head guard narrowed his eyes. He had also heard that the second elder was a rather young man who was extremely powerful. Back then, even Elder Luli was no match for him. However, the sallow-faced middle-aged man before him did not seem to be the case. How dare you pretend to be the second elder? You're courting death. Chief Xing's face was a little ugly. He snorted coldly, and the mind power of a complete grade 4 surged out. He flew directly toward Zhuowen, wanting to get rid of him completely. Zhuowen's eyes became colder. Regardless of whether it was the young man or the Chief Xing, they were in cahoots. He had even taken out his identity token, but the two of them still wanted to deny it. Bang! Zhuowen stomped his foot, and a terrifying mind power poured out. Before the Chief Xing could even get close to Zhuowen, he only felt a heavenly pressure crushing him. Then, his entire body flew in the opposite direction and landed heavily on the ground. I'm pretending? Do you think I still need to pretend? Zhuowen came in front of the young man. His expression was cold and emotionless. His eyes were piercingly cold, looking at the middle-aged man in front of him. The young man was so scared that he fell to the ground and complained in his heart. He did not expect the middle-aged man in front of him to have such powerful mind power. You'd better not mess around. This is the Arcane Art Guild, and I'm the disciple of the ninth elder. If you mess around, you won't be able to walk out of the Arcane Art Guild. The young man trembled and actually dared to threaten him. Zhuowen did not bother to talk nonsense with him. His right hand formed a sword finger and suddenly pointed at the young man's forehead. A scream was heard, and the young man held his forehead with both hands and kept rolling on the ground. You actually destroyed my knowledge, see? How could you do this? The young man's shrill scream immediately moved many of the people present. Their eyes were filled with dread. The most important part of an arcanist was the knowledge see in the depths of the forehead. Its importance was equivalent to the dantian of a martial artist. If the knowledge see was destroyed, it meant that there was no place to store mind power. From then on, he would be a cripple. This is just a small punishment for you, Zhuowen said coldly. Whoosh! There was a piercing sound, and a gray-robed old man came out from the Arcane Art Guild. He came to the center of the hall and looked around at the silver-robed guards who were beaten to the ground and the screaming young man. His face became extremely ugly. It's the ninth elder. I didn't expect even the ninth elder to come out. This person beat up the silver-robed guards and crippled the ninth elder's registered disciple Wuxia. I'm afraid the ninth elder will not let this person go. Everyone's eyes were focused on the ninth elder and Zhuowen who had just appeared. You beat up the silver-robed guards and crippled Wuxia? The ninth elder shouted angrily at Zhuowen. Zhuowen shook his head, and his face slowly changed from a middle-aged man to a young man. He said, Ninth elder, I haven't seen you for a long time. Don't you recognize me? The second elder Zhuowen? I've heard about what happened in the imperial capital. So you're not dead. The ninth elder was startled at first, and then said with some fear. The scene of Zhuowen personally killing Master Yanhua, an elder Luli at the Arcane Art Guild Square, was still vivid in the ninth elder's mind. The young man in front of him possessed strength that was much stronger than him. The ninth elder. Originally, I came here to look for Elder Shiwan, but your registered disciple, Wuxia, did not know what was good for him and insisted on blocking me outside. He didn't even want to inform me, and planned to expel me. That's not all. Later on, I took out the second elder's identity token to show my identity, but he said that my token was fake. I had no choice but to cripple him. The ninth elder shouldn't blame me, right? Zhuowen said politely with his hands cupped. Hearing this, the ninth elder's mouth twitched. He secretly scolded Wuxia's stupidity in his heart and laughed. Of course not. This rebellious disciple did not know etiquette, and even slandered you, the second elder. He deserved to die. Now you've only crippled his mind. That's letting him off easy. Since the second elder wants to look for Elder Shiwan, then follow me. I'll bring you to see him. With that, the ninth elder did not even look at Zhuowen, and politely led the way in front of him. Zhuowen naturally followed behind him. After Zhuowen and the ninth elder left, the rest of the arcanists in the hall were in an uproar. Their eyes were filled with shock. I didn't expect this person to be the second elder. Fortunately, I didn't join in the fun. Otherwise, I wouldn't have ended up any better than Wuxia. Wuxia reaped what he sowed. He relied on his identity as the ninth elder's disciple, and was used to acting like a tyrant. Now that he has kicked a metal plate, he deserves it. The discussion around them grew louder and louder. Wuxia slowly stood up, his eyes filled with confusion. Now that his mind had been crippled, he was no longer destined to be an arcanist. He was just an ordinary person. Hearing the mockery around him, the confusion in Wuxia's eyes was finally replaced by regret. He did not expect that he, Wuxia, would end up like this because of his impulsiveness. It was really sad. Zhuowen naturally did not care about Wuxia's situation. At that moment, he was following the ninth elder into the depths of the association. Soon, the two of them came to an ordinary iron door. The ninth elder knocked on the door and said, "Elder Shiwan, the second elder Zhuowen, has returned and wants to see you." Creak. The iron door opened automatically. Zhuowen found that it was pitch black behind the iron door. It was actually a deep passageway. Elder Shiwan is on the other side of the passageway. You can go in. After the ninth elder finished speaking, he quietly left the place. Zhuowen stepped through the iron door and walked along the passageway unhurriedly. After a while, he came to a spacious room. The ceiling of the room was very high. There were countless black iron chains on top of it. There was a huge formation in the middle of the chains. Inside the formation was a world of ice and snow. The cold air was oppressive. It was the extreme mysterious formation that Elder Shiwan had set up. Inside the extreme mysterious formation were the 9 types of earth fires that had gone out of control. At that moment, the 9 types of earth fires were much more obedient under the control of the extreme mysterious formation. They were no longer as wild and violent as before. In the middle of the room, an old figure sat quietly. Zhuowen quietly stared at the figure and said softly, "Junior Zhuowen greets Elder Shiwan." Elder Shiwan opened his eyes and stared at Zhuowen. He smiled and said, "You have done a lot of sensational things in the imperial capital. Even many people in Baiyang town know your name." Zhuowen scratched his head and said with a wry smile, "Elder Shiwan, don't make fun of me. My cultivation is not enough. As for those big things, they are only relative to ordinary warriors." Chapter 842. SS Request. Elder Shiwan's words did not surprise Zhuowen at all. With a glint in his eyes, Zhuowen said, "Elder Shiwan, to be honest, my request this time is a little too much, so I hope you won't blame me for being rude. It's all right. After all, you're also a member of the Arcane Guild. If you have any difficulties, just tell me. If I can do it, I won't refuse." Elder Shiwan smiled faintly. Nodding, Zhuowen briefly explained some of the things that happened in the Imperial City, and he did not hide the fact that he had a dragon soul. The Arcane Guild was spread throughout the Heavenly Armor continent, and its influence was not inferior to the Blue Dragon Hall. Therefore, Zhuowen was not afraid to reveal the fact that he had a dragon soul. Of course, Zhuowen did not say anything about the Azure Dragon Hall. After all, the Azure Dragon Hall was the inheritance of a sage. If such a thing was revealed, no matter how noble Elder Shiwan was, it would inevitably arouse greed in his heart. The preciousness of the sage's inheritance would definitely cause a commotion in the entire Eastern Land. At that time, it would cause countless forces in the Eastern Land to covet it. Therefore, Zhuowen could not reveal such an important secret. "Zhuo Xiaoyu, I didn't expect you to be a Ryuka descendant with a dragon soul." Elder Shiwan looked at Zhuowen in astonishment, and his tone was full of surprise. Not to mention the Azure Dragon Hall in the Imperial City, the Qing Emperor will not let you go, because the Qing Emperor is the outer elder of the Azure Dragon Main Hall. And at the same time, He has an extremely rare contract scroll. He is more interested in a Ryuka descendant with a dragon soul than others. Elder Shiyuan's words caused Zhuan's pupils to shrink. This Elder Shiyuan really knew a lot. He even knew that the Qing Emperor was an outer elder of the Azure Dragon Main Hall. My very good senior, brother Han Tian from Muqing County, was captured by the Qing Emperor and imprisoned in the Imperial City dungeon because he saved me. I want to save brother Han Tian, so I'm here to ask Elder Shiyuan for your help. Zhuan said rather sincerely. Locked up in the dungeon of the Imperial City? That was the most heavily guarded place in the Imperial City. It's not that easy for you to save someone from inside. Elder Shiyuan said with a serious look. Zhuan nodded and said, I know. That's why I came to ask Elder Shiyuan this time. I heard that you once fought with Emperor Qing. I know that with your strength, you can hold him back. Elder Shiyuan's eyes flickered as he sighed and said, Emperor Qing is not as simple as you think. His strength is unfathomable. Although I had some conflicts with Emperor Qing back then, Emperor Qing did not use his full strength. I'm guessing that if Emperor Qing uses his full strength, even I won't be his match. What? Is Emperor Qing so powerful? Zhuan asked in surprise. Strong. And it's very strong, Elder Shiyuan said with certainty. Zhuan's eyes flickered. He knew that since Elder Shiyuan had said so, he was probably rejecting his request. Zhuan cupped his hands and said, Then I'll have to bother you, Elder Shiyuan. With that, just as Zhuan was about to leave, Elder Shiyuan's voice sounded. Zhuxiaoyu, don't be in a hurry to leave. There might be a way. If you can tell me the quality of your dragon soul, I can consider helping you. Turning around, Zhuan stared at Elder Shiyuan and hesitated for a moment before saying, Back then, Qing Yin used the dragon soul detector to check the quality of the dragon soul in my body. But in the end, the dragon soul detector shattered. Zhuan did not specifically report the quality of the dragon soul. In fact, even he did not know how high Xiaohei's quality was. After all, this guy did not even put a 9th grade dragon soul in his eyes. It was really difficult for him to define. What? Even the dragon soul detector was shattered? It seems that the dragon soul in Zhuo Xiaoyou's body is very powerful. If that's the case, I'll help you once and follow you to the Imperial City dungeon. Elder Shiyuan stood up and stared at the young man in front of him in surprise. His eyes were full of passion. If the quality of Zhuan's dragon soul was not high, Elder Shiyuan would not be interested in helping Zhuan. After all, if the quality of the dragon soul was too low, it would be impossible for him to achieve much in the future. However, Zhuan's dragon soul was so powerful that even the dragon soul detector in the Azure Dragon Branch Hall was shattered. Obviously, Zhuan's dragon soul was very powerful, which also proved that Zhuan's talent was extremely terrifying. Elder Shiyuan also had some understanding of the former Ryuka. Once the dragon soul awakened in a Ryuka's body was of high quality, their future achievements would definitely be earth-shattering. Obviously, the young man in front of him should be such a talented person. Such a person could only be given enough help when he was weak. Then, when he became strong, it would definitely be of great benefit to the Arcane Guild. As for Emperor Qing's revenge, Elder Shiyuan was not very worried, because the Arcane Guild's influence in the Heavenly Armor continent was very strong and spread to every corner of the continent. Emperor Qing would not dare to touch the Arcane Guild. Therefore, when Elder Shiyuan agreed to help Zhuan, he was gambling on Zhuan's talent and future achievements. After all, such a genius was hard to find in 100 years. Looking at Elder Shiyuan who agreed so readily, Zhuan was stunned. However, after thinking for a moment, he understood Elder Shiyuan's idea and said in surprise, Thank you for your help, Elder Shiyuan. Next, Zhuan and Elder Shiyuan discussed some details about the rescue in the dungeon of the Imperial City. After setting the rescue time, they temporarily stayed in the Arcane Guild. 3 days later, Zhuan and Elder Shiyuan left the Arcane Guild and headed for the Imperial City. When the two entered the Imperial City, they did not act immediately. Instead, they found an inconspicuous inn and prepared to go to the dungeon of the Imperial City at night. Elder Shiyuan was quite curious about Zhuan's 100 transformation technique. This technique could not only change one's appearance, but also one's aura. A secret technique that could change one's cultivation was really rare. Moreover, the two's plan was not complicated. As Zhuowen had the 100 transformation technique, he could quietly change his appearance and sneak into the dungeon of the imperial city to act according to the circumstances. After rescuing Lu Hantian, Elder Shi Yuan would come out to help. Just as Zhuowen and Elder Shi Yuan were discussing the rescue plan, there was some chaos in the Blue Dragon Hall. Aoki, who was sitting on the throne, had an extremely ugly look on his face. From the information gathered by the spies of the Blue Dragon Hall, the experts of the Blue Dragon Hall that Qin Yan had brought out were actually annihilated in Wuxia County. It was said that the one who caused the annihilation of the experts of the Blue Dragon Hall was Zhuowen. Zhuowen, that little bastard, is actually not dead. Moreover, his strength has soared, and he has annihilated all the experts of the Blue Dragon Hall that Qin Yan had brought. Aoki slammed the armrest of the throne. His face was pale, and his heart was inexplicably shocked. Not only because Zhuowen was not dead, but also because Zhuowen's strength had soared. This time, Qing Yi, Su Lingtian, and the elites of the Blue Dragon Hall that Qin Yan had brought out were not weak. However, they had all been annihilated by Zhuowen. Moreover, it was said that the masters and elites of the three big families, the Grand Family, the Chao family and the Feng family, were also annihilated in Wuxia County. Zhuowen's strength was somewhat beyond Aoki's expectations. How did he manage to survive? Moreover, how did his strength soar so much in such a short period of time? Could it be related to Emperor Qing? Aoki muttered to himself. Back then, Zhuowen had been taken away by Emperor Qing. It was obvious that Zhuowen's appearance was related to Emperor Qing. Moreover, later on, Aoki had sent many martial artists to Wuxia County to investigate. To their astonishment, they had discovered that Zhuowen seemed to have evaporated from the world, and there was no trace of him. In addition, the people of the Zhuo family were nowhere to be found. This made Aoki feel even worse. What is Emperor Qing doing? I respect him as an outer sect elder of the main hall, so I have always tolerated him. However, he actually released such an important person like Zhuowen, and even helped him increase his cultivation. This is outrageous. I have to ask him. The more Aoki thought about it, the more upset he felt. In the end, he decided to head to the imperial city to verify with Emperor Qing. The sky gradually darkened as a green figure streaked across the sky. He passed through the sky above the imperial city and directly arrived at the throne room. The guards of the imperial city did not stop him. After all, Aoki was the hall master of the Blue Dragon Hall. They still knew him, so they would not foolishly stop Aoki. After entering the throne room, he came to a magnificent hall. He saw Emperor Qing standing quietly in the center of the hall with his hands behind his back. His eyes were slightly closed as if he was cultivating. As if he sensed someone coming in, Emperor Qing slowly opened his eyes. He stared at Aoki and said, I wonder why Prince Aoki is here? Aoki snorted and said, Elder Qing Ji, a straightforward person does not resort to insinuations. Why did you bring Zhuowen back to the imperial city? Emperor Qing raised his eyebrows and said indifferently, This is my private matter. It doesn't seem to have anything to do with Prince Aoki, right? Elder Qing Ji, don't blame me for being rude. This time, the experts sent by the Blue Dragon Hall to Wuxia County have all been annihilated. This has nothing to do with you. Aoki snorted. Emperor Qing frowned slightly and said unhappily, Prince Aoki, what does this have to do with me? Also, there are no experts in Wuxia County. How could the Blue Dragon Hall be annihilated? Because the person who annihilated the experts of the Blue Dragon Hall was Zhuowen. Back then, Zhuowen was taken away by you, Elder Qingji. Now not only is Zhuowen not dead, but he is also alive and well. Elder Qingji, do you think this has anything to do with you? At this point, Aoki's tone was slightly agitated, and his voice became extremely cold. This time, the Blue Dragon Hall had suffered a great loss. Basically, the Azure Dragon Guards were all dead. Moreover, Qing Yan, who had a third-grade dragon soul, had also fallen. This was a great blow to the Blue Dragon Hall. What? You said that Zhuowen appeared in Wuxia County and annihilated the experts of the Blue Dragon Hall? Chapter 843. An open plot. The Qing Emperor had never entered the dragon vein before. Even if he did, he would be repelled by the surging dragon vein aura, and would not be able to go deep into the dragon vein. However, according to Aoki, not only was Zhuowen not dead, but he had also appeared in Wuxia County and killed all the experts in the Blue Dragon Hall. Clearly, Zhuowen's strength had improved a lot. Could there be a passage to the outside world in the dragon vein? What benefits are there in the depths of the dragon vein that allowed Zhuowen's strength to improve so much? The Qing Emperor frowned. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that the dragon vein under the throne room was not simple. He could not go deep into the dragon vein, but Zhuowen had. If he could capture Zhuowen, he could interrogate him to find out the secret of the dragon vein. Aoki saw the shock on the Qing Emperor's face, and the anger in his eyes faded. He asked doubtfully, "Elder Qingji, don't tell me you don't know that Zhuowen is still alive?" "I really don't know. When I captured Zhuowen and brought him back to the Imperial City, I wanted to explore the mystery of the dragon soul in his body. However, I did not expect his dragon soul to be so powerful and extraordinary. It actually appeared in his sea of consciousness and took Zhuowen away after taking one blow from me. As for where he went, even I don't know. That's why I was shocked when Zhuowen came back to life." The Qing Emperor shook his head and said helplessly. Aoki stared quietly at the Qing Emperor and realized that the latter did not seem to be lying. He frowned and said, "It seems that I have misunderstood Elder Qingji. However, that little bastard, Zhuowen, killed my branch hall's inheritor, Qing Yan, and even killed many experts like Qing Yi. I won't let this matter rest. I hope that Elder Qingji can assist me in capturing Zhuowen." The Lotus Emperor nodded and said, "Of course. Not to mention the fact that he killed your Blue Dragon Hall's expert. Just the fact that he is a descendant of the Ryuka clan is enough for me to not let him go. However, the Qing Xian Empire is so big. Trying to find this child is like finding a needle in a haystack. If he deliberately avoids us, it will be very difficult for us to find him," Aoki said worriedly. However, the Azure Emperor smiled and said, "I have a way to lure this child out. Lu Hantian from Wuxia County has a very close relationship with that Lu Hantian from Zhuowen. Right now, Lu Hantian is being imprisoned by me in the Imperial City's dungeon. If I were to spread this news, I'm afraid that Zhuowen would not ignore that Lu Hantian. At that time, he will definitely come to the Imperial City's dungeon. In that case, we don't need to look for this child. We just need to wait for him." Aoki's eyes flickered. Aoki had also heard that Lu Hantian was being imprisoned by the Lotus Emperor. Originally, he thought that it was a rumor. Now it seemed that it was true. "Prince Aoki, call those two old farts from your branch hall out. After I spread the news, Zhuowen will definitely appear. This child's dragon soul is not simple. I'm afraid that it is even more terrifying than Zhuo Xiaoqian's dragon soul. Therefore, we must be absolutely sure this time," the Lotus Emperor suddenly said. I actually need to invite the Grand Elders of the branch hall to capture that Zhuowen?" Aoki said in surprise. The Lotus Emperor said seriously, "This child is not simple. We must not be careless. Not only you, this emperor will also invite the 5 great Empyreans of the imperial family. At that time, we will definitely surround the entire Imperial City's underground prison. If Zhuowen enters the underground prison, then he can forget about leaving. The 5 heavenly venerables of the imperial family? Elder Qingji, you are indeed bold. Then, I will invite the 2 grand elders of the branch hall out." Aoki nodded. Immediately after, he cupped his hands at the Lotus Emperor and left the throne room. Looking at Aoki's departing figure, the Lotus Emperor narrowed his eyes, which contained a deep chill. He muttered to himself, "Zhuowen, this time, I will definitely not let you escape. Whether it is the dragon soul in your body or the secret of the dragon vein, you will have to spit it out." As he spoke, the Lotus Emperor flicked his sleeve and gradually hid in the darkness. His figure was faintly discernible. The night gradually receded. A ray of warm sunlight penetrated through the layers of white clouds and shone on the vast earth. It brought about a lively light in the dark time. The originally deserted streets of the imperial capital were now bustling with activity. The bustling flow of people was like a long dragon, shuttling back and forth on the streets. Have you heard? Yesterday, the Lotus Emperor issued an announcement. The content is said to be about the #1 expert of Wuxia County, Lu Hantian. What? It is said that Lu Hantian is an expert at the peak of the heavenly venerate realm. The Lotus Emperor places great importance on this person. Is he really going to give him an official position? Not really. At this moment, Lu Hantian has already become a prisoner. According to the Lotus Emperor, Lu Hantian is not from our Qingxian Empire. Instead, he is a spy from the Yinxian Empire, which is a neighbor of our Qingxian Empire. Later on, the Lotus Emperor saw through his true identity and captured him in one fell swoop. He is imprisoned in the Imperial City's dungeon. No way. That Lu Hantian is actually a spy sent by the Yinxian Empire. If it is true, then the Yinxian Empire has suffered a great loss. A peak heavenly venerate realm expert was captured by the Lotus Emperor just like that. In an inconspicuous inn, many cultivators were discussing fervently. The topic was obviously about Lu Hantian. Since this morning, the news that Lu Hantian was a spy from the Yinxian Empire spread through the streets and alleys of the entire imperial city. At the same time, most cultivators also knew that Lu Hantian was imprisoned in the imperial city's dungeon by the Lotus Emperor. In an inconspicuous corner of the inn, an old man and a young man were slowly pouring wine. The eyes of the younger man narrowed when he heard the discussions around him. The back of his hand, which was holding the wine cup, had turned somewhat white due to him using too much strength. These two people were naturally Zhuowen and Elder Shiwan, who had rushed over from Baiyang town. As Zhuowen was too famous in the imperial city, many people knew him. Therefore, after entering the imperial city, Zhuowen had already used the 100 transformation divine art to completely change his appearance and aura. However, this time, he did not become a middle-aged man with a sallow complexion. Instead, he became a young man in white who was about 20 years old with sharp eyes. Elder Shiwan also saw Zhuowen's actions. He shook his head and said softly, "It seems that the Lotus Emperor already knows that you are not dead. He must have deliberately spread the news." Zhuowen nodded. In fact, after the experts from the 4 major forces, including the Blue Dragon Hall and the Grand Family, had been destroyed in Wuxia County, he knew that this matter could not be hidden from the Lotus Emperor. When the time came, it would not be difficult to find out that it was him, Zhuowen, who had done it. The Lotus Emperor clearly knew that Zhuowen and Lu Hantian had a very good relationship. If Zhuowen was not dead, he would definitely go to the Imperial City's dungeon to save Lu Hantian. Therefore, the Lotus Emperor released the news in order to lure Zhuowen into a trap. The Lotus Emperor's plot was right in front of Zhuowen. Therefore, although Zhuowen knew that this was the Lotus Emperor's trap, he had no choice but to step into it step by step. This was because he could not ignore the life and death of Lu Hantian. Even if it was a trap, Zhuowen would step into it without hesitation to save Lu Hantian. Since the Lotus Emperor released such news, I'm afraid that the Imperial City's dungeon will be even more heavily guarded. Moreover, I suspect that the Lotus Emperor deliberately released this news, and the dungeon has already sent countless experts to wait for him. Elder Shiwan's face was a little solemn. If it was a normal situation, Zhuowen would have a high chance of saving Lu Hantian from the dungeon by relying on the 100 transformation technique. However, the Lotus Emperor had used an open plot to set up numerous traps and waited for Zhuowen to take the bait. Without a doubt, the Imperial City's dungeon was much more terrifying and dangerous than usual. Even Elder Shiwan was not confident. I must save Big Brother Lu Hantian. Even if it's a dragon's pool or a tiger's den, I must take the risk. Zhuowen's gaze was firm. Back then, Lu Hantian had entered the Imperial City alone for Zhuowen and put himself in danger. Zhuowen was not an ungrateful person. Zhuowen had to repay such kindness. Of course, the matter of saving Lu Hantian in the Imperial City was not something that could be done recklessly. During this period of time, he had to plan carefully. Looking at the determination in the eyes of the young man in front of him, Elder Shiwan was a little moved. It was obvious that Zhuowen was a very loyal person, There were many people like him who could do this for his friends and brothers. It was also because of this that Elder Shiwan was even more determined to help Zhuowen. The young man in front of him was not only terrifyingly talented and possessed the dragon soul, he was also a very loyal person. He believed that Zhuowen would not do despicable things in the future. Elder Shiwan, I will go to the outer area of the Imperial City to take a look and confirm the exact location. We will take action tonight. Zhuowen whispered a few words to Elder Shiwan and left silently. As Zhuowen had changed his appearance, he did not attract the attention of others in the inn. As Zhuowen had the layout map that Moyan Wuxiang had given him, Zhuowen knew the location of the Imperial City's underground prison very well. The Imperial City's underground prison was located in a wasteland in the northwest corner of the Imperial City. Above the wasteland, there was a tall and lofty rockery. There were many black armored soldiers patrolling around the rockery. Following the flow of people on the streets, Zhuowen was getting closer to the Imperial City. Just as he was about to enter the Imperial City, the noise in front of him attracted his attention. Both sides of the street in front of him were crowded with people. The martial artists in the Imperial City had gathered on both sides of the street and were staring at a luxurious sedan in the middle of the street. The sedan was huge and had 4 eaves that faced the sky. Below the sedan, there were 4 strange beasts that were slowly carrying the sedan. The 4 strange beasts under the sedan had extremely terrifying auras. They were all at the Ultimate Emperor realm. An ordinary Ultimate Emperor realm martial artist would not be a match for these strange beasts. However, what attracted Zhuowen's attention was not the 4 strange beasts under the sedan, but the arrogant figure on the sedan. The first prince Huangfu Wudao? Chapter 844. Taking the initiative to provoke. The first prince has come out of seclusion today. It's said that the first prince went into seclusion to cultivate after being conferred the title of Heavenly Marquis more than a month ago, hoping to improve his cultivation. Now that he has come out, his cultivation must have improved greatly. Yes, because the first prince is in seclusion, he hasn't used the Heavenly Marquis token to go to the Imperial Barracks to select 100,000 Imperial soldiers. I'm afraid that he's coming out of seclusion today for the 100,000 Imperial soldiers. He's indeed heading towards the Imperial Barracks. The first prince's talent is peerless, and he stood out in the ranking tournament where geniuses gathered. With the 100,000 Imperial soldiers, I'm afraid that the first prince's personal strength is no weaker than the 5 great clans. On the streets, the bustling cultivators' eyes were filled with envy as they chattered incessantly like little birds. For most of the cultivators on the streets, Huangfu Wudao was a lofty figure with great strength and peerless talent. He was the object of worship in many cultivators' hearts. As for Zhuowen, although he had caused quite a stir at the time, it was a pity that he was absent from the Heavenly Marquis battle for no reason, causing many people to suspect that he was absent out of fear. However, after half a month, Zhuowen and his deeds had almost been forgotten in the imperial capital. This martial world was cruel. Only the deeds of the victors would be remembered and praised. As for the losers, no matter how sensational their deeds were, they would be forgotten with the passage of time. And now, Zhuowen was such a living example. The cultivators on the streets were basically talking about the first prince Zhuowen. As for Zhuowen, no one mentioned him. Huangfu Wudao stood on the palanquin with his hands behind his back, looking high and mighty, his eyes full of arrogance. He naturally noticed the respectful gazes of the surrounding cultivators, and the corners of his mouth involuntarily curled into a smile. He enjoyed the feeling of being supported by countless people. Mixed in with the numerous martial artists, Zhuowen naturally noticed the arrogant gaze of Huangfu Wudao, and his heart was filled with a sneer. At the same time, he had also clearly heard the discussions in the crowd, causing his heart to become even colder. He, Zhuowen, had only disappeared for a little over a month, yet no one had mentioned him. It seemed that this had something to do with the imperial family sealing off some information. After all, when Zhuowen challenged Huangfu Wudao, he had almost defeated Huangfu Wudao. This matter was extremely sensational in the imperial city, but now it seemed that no one had mentioned this matter. Obviously, the imperial family had sealed off this news. Therefore, most people in the imperial capital only knew that Zhuowen was afraid to be absent during the Heavenly Marquis battle, which allowed Huangfu Wudao to smoothly obtain the position of Heavenly Marquis. The first prince is indeed powerful. However, Zhuowen is not weak either. Back then, Zhuowen forced the first prince into an extremely miserable state. If not for Emperor Qing's interference, I'm afraid the outcome of the battle would have been in Zhuowen's favor. Suddenly, a rather crisp voice rang out. A young and vigorous youth, with a flushed face, curled his lips and refuted the surrounding people. Sigh, how could a child like you possibly know about these things? The first prince is so powerful, so how could he be forced into a miserable state by Zhuowen? If you don't know, then don't speak nonsense. It's unlikely that Zhuowen can contend with the first prince. In the entire Qingxian Empire, the first prince is the strongest of the younger generation. Although Zhuowen is powerful, he should be below the first prince. Many cultivators in the surroundings pointed at the youth, their words containing a lot of criticism, thinking that the youth was talking nonsense. Humph. I was around the square in front of the throne room at that time, and I saw it with my own eyes. Although the first prince is powerful, Zhuowen is not weak either. In any case, I feel that Zhuowen is very strong, the youth said stubbornly with a red face. Whoosh! The sound of the air being torn apart sounded. Huangfu Wudao, who was originally standing on the palanquin, had unknowingly arrived in front of the youth. He stared coldly at the youth and said in a cold voice, "Do you mean to say that I'm inferior to Zhuowen?" Huangfu Wudao's appearance immediately intimidated many cultivators in the surroundings. Moreover, these cultivators continuously retreated, not daring to get too close to the youth. Huangfu Wudao's cruel and tyrannical reputation was well known in the entire imperial capital. If one did not go according to his wishes in the slightest, the outcome would not be very good. The youth's entire body trembled, and his lips trembled. He did not expect that Huangfu Wudao would actually come down personally, and his heart was slightly flustered. "I'm asking you a question. Why aren't you speaking?" Huangfu Wudao smiled coldly. His right hand lifted the youth's lapel, and he lifted him off the ground. The youth's legs were dangling in the air, and he was completely at a loss. "First Prince, please calm down. My son was just speaking nonsense. Please don't take offense." When Huangfu Wudao mentioned the youth, a middle-aged man in a blue robe hurriedly walked out from the crowd and knelt before Huangfu Wudao to plead for the youth. "Humph. It's the father's fault for not teaching his son well. You deserve death for raising such an unfilial son." Huangfu Wudao grunted coldly, and then he suddenly kicked out, directly kicking the middle-aged man in a blue robe in the chest, and terrifying origin energy poured out. The middle-aged man grunted in pain, as his entire body was kicked flying by Huangfu Wudao, and he was dragged on the ground for a few tens of meters, before finally colliding with a stone pillar at the side of the street. Only then did his figure stop moving, and his eyes were open wide with rage, as he actually lost all signs of life. Huangfu Wudao had actually kicked the youth's father to death with a single kick. The surrounding people were silent like cicadas in winter, and they silently stared at the dead middle-aged man. Yet not a single person spoke a word of justice. Instead, all of them lowered their heads, and did not dare look into Huangfu Wudao's eyes. "Father!" the youth exclaimed in surprise, and his eyes instantly became moist. He never imagined that Huangfu Wudao would actually be so overbearing and kill his father with a single move. "I'll ask you one more time. Do you think I'm inferior to Zhuowen?" Huangfu Wudao pinched the youth as he asked coldly. The youth laughed bitterly instead, and he stared resentfully at Huangfu Wudao as he shouted furiously, "Right, you're indeed inferior to Zhuowen. If it wasn't for His Majesty Emperor Qing being partial and postponing the battle for 3 days, then you would have lost without a doubt if you continued the battle at that time. Your position of Heavenly Marquis is unworthy of its name, and Zhuowen is stronger than you." As soon as the youth spoke these words, the surrounding people sighed in their hearts. This youth is dead for sure. He actually dared to talk back to Huangfu Wudao like this. Good. You actually have such courage at such a young age. Then I'll send you to see your father right away. Huangfu Wudao was so furious that he started laughing instead. He was just about to kill the youth when a blood-red light flashed out from the crowd and flashed directly towards Huangfu Wudao. Huangfu Wudao grunted coldly, and then he decisively let go of the youth. With a wave of his right hand, countless blades of air condensed, and his right hand transformed into a transparent blade that fiercely slashed at the blood-red light. Thud! 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 What shocked Huangfu Wudao was that the power contained within the blood-red light was extremely terrifying. It was as if he was facing a towering mountain at this moment, and the pressure on his hands was so great that he couldn't help but take a few steps back. As they watched Huangfu Wudao retreat, the surroundings fell silent. Then they saw that the thing that forced Huangfu Wudao to retreat was actually a strange blood-red spear. At this moment, the blood-red spear was upside down in front of everyone, and its surface was suffused with a bloody aura. The youth also got up at this moment, and a trace of brilliance flashed in his eyes as he looked at the blood-red spear in front of him. Who is it? Huangfu Wudao's gaze was gloomy as he stabilized his body and stared fixedly ahead. The owner of this blood-red spear was definitely not ordinary. The pressure that it gave him just now was extremely great, like the might of the heavens. Everyone followed Huangfu Wudao's gaze and looked ahead. They were all curious as to who had used this blood-red spear. Thud! 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 Clear and melodious footsteps sounded out, and a figure that was tall and straight like a pine tree silently walked out from the crowd. The person that appeared before everyone was a white-clothed youth with a sharp gaze. His entire body was spotless, and he looked extremely clean. Everyone was stunned once again when they saw this youth. It wasn't because of the youth's appearance or temperament, but because this youth merely looked to be in his early 20s, and was even slightly younger than Huangfu Wudao. But the blood-red spear that he'd used just now had actually forced Huangfu Wudao to take a few steps back, and this was extremely rare amongst cultivators of the same age. Who are you? Huangfu Wudao's gaze was gloomy. He hadn't expected that the person who'd made a move would actually be this youth, that looked even younger than him. And there was a trace of shock in his heart. He, Huangfu Wudao, prided himself as the #1 person in the younger generation. Besides the already dead Zhuowen, there really wasn't anyone in the younger generation who could threaten him. But this youth that was slightly younger than him actually gave him a rather strong feeling of threat. I've heard that the first prince, Huangfu Wudao, is the #1 person in the younger generation of the Qingxian Empire. Furthermore, you've even obtained the position of Heavenly Marquis, the highest honor in the empire. Today, I'm untalented, but I'd like to see what kind of trash the first prince, the #1 genius, is. Zhuowen didn't directly answer Huangfu Wudao's question, and instead continued to speak as he pleased. Hua! As soon as these words were spoken, the surrounding crowd burst into an uproar. They hadn't expected that this mysterious youth who'd suddenly appeared would actually want to challenge the first prince, Huangfu Wudao, in front of everyone's eyes. How bold of him! Huangfu Wudao's eyes narrowed slightly. This person actually dared to challenge him as soon as he arrived, and this made him faintly feel that something was wrong. In addition to the trace of terrifying pressure he'd felt from the blood-red spear earlier, he began to hesitate. What? As the first prince of the imperial family, you actually don't dare to accept the challenge? Then your title as the #1 expert in the younger generation of the Qingxian Empire doesn't live up to the name. It's just as that youth said. Zhuowen sneered. Hearing this, the surrounding crowd also looked at Huangfu Wudao with puzzlement on their faces. Huangfu Wudao's hesitant attitude indeed made them somewhat puzzled. Humph! Why wouldn't I dare? Since you want to die, I'll fulfill your wish. As he spoke, Huangfu Wudao stomped his foot, and countless air blades swirled in the air as they swept straight towards Zhuowen. When he arrived above Zhuowen, he stretched out his right hand, and countless air blades turned into a hurricane that enveloped Zhuowen's head. Huangfu Wudao's progress wasn't slow, and he was actually already at the advanced stage of the Xuanzuan realm. His talent was indeed not weak, but the current Zhuowen was no longer the same as before, and he was completely unafraid of Huangfu Wudao. On the contrary, the one who should be afraid was Huangfu Wudao. Chapter 845. Black Dragon Spear Technique. Blood light flashed as the strange blood spear instantly arrived in front of Huangfu Wudao. Huangfu Wudao's pupils shrank as he hastily retreated in an attempt to avoid the strange blood spear. However, what caused Huangfu Wudao's expression to turn ugly was that with every step he retreated, the blood spear would take a step closer. In an instant, it was already close to his neck, as if it could kill him at any time. What a strange blood spear! Nine-headed snake, come out! Huangfu Wudao's expression grew even more ghastly when he sensed the blood spear that was like a maggot in his bones. He stomped his foot, and a nine-headed snake had shot out explosively from his body and directly bit towards the blood spear that was flashing over. Clang! The clear sound of metal clashing rang out as the blood spear was blocked by the nine-headed snakehead's attack and stopped in midair. Boom! At the same time, the enormous body of the nine-headed snake had completely emerged from Huangfu Wudao's body. The terrifying snake's body was several hundred meters long and looked exceptionally frightening and shocking. Palm-sized scales covered the entire body of the nine-headed snake, emitting a chilling light. The first prince has even used the nine-headed snake armor soul. Looks like this blood spear youth is very strong. Many people in the surroundings discussed spiritedly as they looked at the enormous nine-headed snake in the sky. Shock was revealed on their faces. Die! Huangfu Wudao let out a fierce howl and stomped his foot on the nine-headed snake's head. Instantly, the nine-headed snake's enormous body shot towards Zhuo, when at an extremely fast speed. Zhuowen's gaze was indifferent as he beckoned with his right hand and caught the blood spear that had been sent flying. He stared at the approaching nine-headed snake and swung his blood spear. Immediately, the monstrous sea of blood transformed into a blood-colored vortex with him at the center and soared into the sky. The nine-headed snake and Huangfu Wudao had never imagined that Zhuowen would suddenly use such a terrifying sea of blood attack. They were actually on the verge of collapse from the impact of the sea of blood vortex, and their diving momentum had clearly become unstable. Sacrifice for a noble cause, Azura transformation. A cold voice came from the sea of blood. Then, Zhuowen rushed out of the sea of blood and arrived in front of the Hydra in an instant. With a clink, the blood spear shot out and blocked the head of the Hydra at the front. Soon after, everyone watched in astonishment as the snake head actually twisted and exploded into a bloody mist. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. Instantly, Zhuowen transformed into an illusory blood shadow that was exceptionally nimble like a fish in the sea of blood. On the other hand, the nine-headed snake's movements became extremely sluggish in the sea of blood, as if it had fallen into a swamp. Bang bang! Taking advantage of his advantage in the sea of blood, Zhuowen fired a few shots in succession, simultaneously blasting the remaining few heads of the Hydra into a bloody pulp. The sorrowful cry was like thunder as it rumbled through the air. The nine-headed snake that had lost its 9 heads suddenly fell into the sea of blood, transforming into a ball of light that burrowed back into Huangfu Wudao's body. Huangfu Wudao's expression was extremely unsightly. All 9 heads of the nine-headed snake had been destroyed by Zhuowen. His injuries were severe, and it would probably take a very long time for him to recover. Huangfu Wudao, the first prince of the imperial family, and the #1 expert of the younger generation of the Qingxian Empire. Is this all you've got? Even the 9-headed snake armor soul couldn't withstand a single blow. You really don't live up to your title as the #1 expert of the younger generation. Zhuowen looked down at Huangfu Wudao indifferently as he stepped on the sea of blood. His voice was filled with mockery. This person is so strong. He's much younger than the first prince, but he actually destroyed the first prince's 9-headed snake armor soul. He's too terrifying. Everyone present was no fool when they saw how Zhuowen had killed the 9-headed snake so easily. They all knew that the young man with the blood spear was very likely much stronger than Huangfu Wudao. After all, Huangfu Wudao had used the materialization of his soul armor soul, while the mysterious young man with the blood spear had destroyed the 9-headed snake with just a blood spear. Anyone with a discerning eye could see the difference between the two. Huangfu Wudao's expression was extremely gloomy. His 9-headed snake armor soul had been destroyed so easily. He had completely lost face. Swoosh! Zhuowen stomped his foot and turned into a blood shadow as he swept towards Huang Fuwudao. The blood spear in his hand stretched out, and a sea of blood swept out. He actually intended to envelop Huang Fuwudao, chi like a hanging river. Huang Fuwudao roared furiously. Countless streams of air flowed in reverse, turning into an intense whirlpool of air blades in front of him. It was the chi like a hanging river that had trapped Zhuowen before. Zhuowen's gaze was indifferent. He swung the blood spear in his right hand, and the terrifying sea of blood turned into a blood pillar that was constantly spinning. It directly blasted the chi like a hanging river. Crack! The sound of glass shattering resounded. Instantly, the entire chi like a hanging river collapsed. In the end, the blood spear suddenly shot out and instantly pierced through Huang Fuwudao's right chest, nailing him to the huge stone pillar behind him. At this moment, the surroundings suddenly became silent. Everyone stared blankly at Huang Fuwudao, who was constantly struggling as he was nailed to the stone pillar. The dignified first prince of the imperial family, the #1 expert of the younger generation, who had gathered countless glories, was actually defeated just like that by a young man who was younger than him. Moreover, his chest was pierced through, and he was nailed to the stone pillar. This scene was simply too shocking. As expected of the #1 expert of the younger generation of the Qing Xian Empire, Zhuowen's mocking words immediately caused Huang Fuwudao to be both shocked and furious, and he suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. "How dare you sneak attack the first prince, you're courting death!" A loud shout rang out, followed by the deafening sound of horse hooves coming from the end of the street ahead. A middle-aged man in black armor was leading a group of soldiers in this direction at an extremely fast speed. Imperial Guard Commander Li Jin? As he gazed at Li Jin, who dashed over, and the Imperial Guards behind him, Zhuowen's pupils constricted slightly. Zhuowen naturally knew Li Jin, because it was Li Jin who led the geniuses of Muqing County into the imperial capital for the first time. Whoosh! Li Jin's legs slapped the belly of his horse, and his entire body soared into the air. In an instant, he arrived in front of Huang Fuwudao, who was nailed to the ground by the blood spear. Looking at Huang Fuwudao's pained expression, Li Jin's eyes were gloomy. He pulled out the blood spear and helped Huang Fuwudao down. "Commander Li, this person attacked me from behind for no reason and injured me. He is truly despicable and shameless. You can't let this despicable person off." Huang Fuwudao pointed at Zhuowen and shouted in a trembling voice. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed, and a trace of extreme coldness filled the air. This was the second time Huang Fuwudao had slandered him, that Zhuowen had attacked him. The first time was during the Marquis battle. This time, Huang Fuwudao was defeated in front of everyone, and he still dared to say such baseless words. On the other hand, everyone in the surroundings revealed strange expressions. They'd watched the battle between Zhuowen and Huang Fuwudao from beginning to end, and there'd never been any mention of a sneak attack. But now, Huang Fuwudao had righteously said that Zhuowen had attacked him. Did he still want face? However, no one came out to refute. Everyone lowered their heads and didn't dare to utter a word. Whether it was Huang Fuwudao or Li Jin, they couldn't afford to offend them. If they interceded for the youth with the blood spear in front of them, they would end up in a miserable state. What a despicable brat! How dare he attack the first prince? Li Jin was even more furious. With a flick of his right hand, the blood spear that he had taken from Huang Fuwudao's body was suddenly thrown towards Zhuowen. Its speed was so fast that it almost tore through the air. Zhuowen stood quietly on the spot. When the blood spear arrived in front of him, a sea of blood surged. The blood spear very consciously stopped beside Zhuowen, as obedient as a deer. "You said I attacked him? Why would I need to attack such a piece of trash?" Zhuowen sneered. "Humph! You still want to quibble? You are only from the Xuanzuan realm. What strength do you have to defeat the first prince? It was clearly a sneak attack. What a despicable and shameless person." Li Jin's voice was even colder. He didn't believe Zhuowen's words at all. "Lord Li Jin, what this big brother said is all true. Huang Fuwudao was indeed defeated by him. However, Huang Fuwudao is really too shameless. He actually slandered this big brother for launching a sneak attack. This is really damaging to his status as a prince." Suddenly, The youth who had been taught a lesson by Huangfu Wudao suddenly spoke and pointed at Huangfu Wudao with an indignant expression. What a bunch of nonsense. I think you should be in cahoots with this despicable and shameless person. Today, I will capture the two of you and throw you into the Imperial City's dungeon. As he spoke, Li Jin took a step forward, and his entire body turned into a hurricane. A large black spear condensed in his right hand and shot towards Zhuowen and the youth. The Imperial City's dungeon? It's over. This youth and the youth are finished. Once they enter the Imperial City's dungeon, they can forget about ever coming out. Hearing Li Jin's words, the surrounding people revealed shocked expressions. The Imperial City's dungeon was extremely famous in the Imperial City. It could be said to be the nightmare of all cultivators. Once imprisoned in the Imperial City's dungeon, there was simply no hope of leaving, because it was simply impossible. Therefore, for a moment, the gazes that everyone looked at Zhuowen, and the youth carried a trace of pity. Want to imprison me in the Imperial City's dungeon? That will depend on your ability. Zhuowen coldly snorted. Similarly, he was not to be outdone. He fiercely swung his blood spear, causing an endless sea of blood to surge and rush towards Li Jin. Black Dragon Spear Technique. Li Jin loudly shouted, and the large black spear pierced forward. Instantly, countless black mist surged, and actually formed a large black dragon that constantly swam around the large black spear. Bang! The large black spear accompanied the large black dragon, and finally heavily smashed into the sea of blood. Subsequently, a terrifying explosion resounded, and the surging sea of blood was actually torn apart by the large black dragon. Whoosh! The large black spear's aura was like a rainbow as it instantly arrived in front of Zhuowen. It wanted to completely strangle Zhuowen. Dong! A crisp sound of metal clashing rang out. Following that, Li Jin was shocked to discover that his large black spear was actually motionless, as if it had been frozen. He raised his head and immediately saw that in front of Zhuowen, a huge furnace had unknowingly appeared. Divine Sun Cauldron, burn for me. Zhuowen's cold voice sounded. Following that, terrifying flames of the sun surged out and enveloped Li Jin's entire body, causing him to hastily block in panic. What a terrifying spirit treasure. This is the power of a royal rank spirit treasure. Li Jin's eyes were filled with shock as he bitterly withstood the corrosion of the flames of the sun. Who exactly was this young man in front of him? He actually possessed a royal rank spirit treasure. Whoosh! Chapter 846. White-browed heavenly sovereign swoosh. A head shot out from the divine sun cauldron along with a pillar of blood. The fresh blood evaporated under the scorching heat of the sun fire. Everyone raised their heads and looked at the head that flew into the air. Their gazes hardened and their faces froze. For a moment, the surrounding atmosphere became strangely silent. Huangfu Wudao covered his wound and saw the head that suddenly flew into the air. His mouth was slightly agape, and he was in a daze. The commander of the Imperial Guards, Li Jin, was an elite who was at the initial stage of the Golden Venerate realm. Yet he had been beheaded by this white-robed youth in front of him, and had died just like that. At that moment, the first thought in everyone's mind was that this was definitely an illusion. However, when Li Jin's head fell to the ground and rolled to the side of Huangfu Wudao's feet, everyone realized that this was not an illusion. It had really happened. The Imperial Guard commander Li Jin had a high status in the Imperial City and was a trusted subordinate who directly took orders from Emperor Qing. Under normal circumstances, Li Jin was a figure that many martial artists in the Imperial City feared. But now, the usually awe-inspiring Li Jin, who was feared by everyone, had his head sent flying by an unknown youth's spear in front of them. Who is this person? Even Li Jin was defeated by a single spear strike? Isn't this too terrifying? Is this an illusion? The Imperial Guard commander Li Jin, who guards the Imperial City, was killed just like that? After the silence, the crowd gasped. They could not imagine that the Imperial Guard commander Li Jin, who was usually high and mighty, would be killed just like that. This was too shocking. Kill. This person actually killed the commander. Let's take revenge for the commander. When everyone regained their senses, The group of imperial guards riding tall horses not far away was the first to recover from their shock. Then, they charged toward Zhuowen with bloodshot eyes. Li Jin had died just like that in front of them. If Emperor Qing wanted to punish them, they would not be able to live. Hence, if they wanted to live, they had to capture the culprit and hand him over to Emperor Qing. Zhuowen's eyes were cold as he stared indifferently at the imperial guards who were charging toward him. With a stomp of his foot, the blood spear in his hand shot out, bringing with it an endless sea of blood. Screams rang out continuously. Then, the group of imperial guards turned into clouds of blood mist in the endless sea of blood. In the blink of an eye, they were all killed. Looking at the annihilated imperial guards, everyone gasped again. This white-robed youth was ruthless. He had actually killed the imperial guards just like that. These imperial guards were all direct subordinates of Emperor Qing. If they were killed just like that, Emperor Qing would probably fly into a rage. Who is it? How dare you create trouble in my imperial city? I think that you have a death wish. Of the Heaven Palace. A loud shout suddenly rang out from within the imperial city. A figure that looked like a rock spreading its wings rapidly flew over. This person was a middle-aged man in his 40s. His hair was black and white, and his eyebrows were long and pale white. He wore a patterned black robe, and rushed over with a gust of wind. Especially when this person saw the annihilated imperial guards and the injured Huangfu Wudao. The anger in his eyes became even more intense. It was as if he wanted to devour someone. White-brow Heavenly Sovereign, save me. This person is abominable. Not only did he launch a sneak attack and injure me, he even annihilated the Imperial Guard's commander, Li Jin, and the rest of the Imperial Guards. This person has no respect for our imperial family. He deserves to die. When Huangfu Wudao saw the middle-aged man rushing over, his eyes immediately revealed a look of hope, and he hurriedly shouted out, his voice filled with excitement. White-brow Heavenly Sovereign. Zhuowen's pupil shrank when he heard Huangfu Wudao's question. From the way the middle-aged man addressed him, he knew that this person was definitely a heavenly sovereign expert. It was impossible for Zhuowen to be a match for such an expert. Kill Huangfu Wudao first, then escape. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He didn't leave immediately, but instead flew straight towards Huangfu Wudao. This Huangfu Wudao was truly shameless to the extreme, and he Zhuowen would definitely kill him here. Zhuowen's actions immediately caused an uproar. They originally thought that Zhuowen would immediately flee with the arrival of White-brow Heavenly Sovereign, but no one expected that Zhuowen didn't choose to flee. Instead, he flew towards Huangfu Wudao with the intention of killing him. Huangfu Wudao's pupils shrank to the size of needles as he retreated. However, he cursed Zhuowen inwardly. A heavenly sovereign expert had arrived, yet this kid didn't flee. Instead, he wanted to kill him. However, after witnessing the scene of Zhuowen killing Li Jin in one move, Huangfu Wudao naturally couldn't meet Zhuowen head-on. He retreated repeatedly in an attempt to avoid Zhuowen's attack. Unfortunately, Zhuowen's speed was much faster than Huangfu Wudao's. At this moment, the blood spear carried an indomitable force as it swept towards Huangfu Wudao's heart, wanting to kill him directly. Audacious thief! You actually dared to attempt to kill the first prince in front of me? White-brow Heavenly Sovereign shouted. He suddenly slapped his right hand, and terrifying origin energy gathered to form a mountain-like palm. It instantly appeared above Zhuowen, and then suddenly descended, landing directly above Zhuowen's head. What a terrifying power! Zhuowen's heart trembled when he felt the origin energy palm crushing down from above. The power contained in this origin energy palm was extremely terrifying. Even the current Zhuowen would be severely injured if he were to be hit directly by it. If Zhuowen wanted to avoid this origin energy palm, he would definitely lose the initiative. At that time, Huangfu Wudao would escape from his pursuit range, and White-brow Heavenly Sovereign would quickly arrive to support him. He would no longer have the chance to kill Huangfu Wudao. Kill! Huangfu Wudao will definitely die today. Zhuowen roared angrily. Waves of ink-black mist surged out of his body. Then the ink-black mist slowly enveloped his entire body. With a stomp of his foot, Zhuowen stepped out of the ink-black fog in the blink of an eye. At this moment, his appearance was extremely strange. His entire body was covered in ink-black dragon scales. His elbows, knees, and back all had sharp black spikes. His face was also covered in black dragon scales, and his eyes had turned dark gold. A huge dragon tail grew from the end of his spine. It was like a huge whip, and with a slight swing, it could set off extremely violent gales. Zhuowen no longer held back in the face of an attack from a heavenly sovereign. He directly materialized his dragon soul and transformed into his dragon man form. According to Xiao He, the dragon man form's defense was extremely abnormal. It was much more terrifying than the Great Sun Nirvana, and could be considered Zhuowen's strongest trump card. Zhuowen's sudden change also caused the onlookers to be puzzled. They did not expect Zhuowen to become so strange. However, Zhuowen's subsequent actions were once again beyond everyone's expectations. Zhuowen, who had transformed into his dragon man form, completely ignored the Yuan power palm that was crushing down from the sky. He swept straight towards Huangfu Wudao without slowing down. Lunatic. He's a complete lunatic. That was what everyone thought. He did not dodge the attack of a heavenly sovereign, and swore to kill Huangfu Wudao even at the cost of his life. It was simply too crazy. Huangfu Wudao was inexplicably horrified. The young man in front of him was too crazy. He wanted to kill him even at the cost of his life. Damn it. As long as I can delay you for a moment, Whitebrow Heavenly Sovereign's attack will come. You're dead for sure. Huangfu Wudao knew that it was impossible to avoid Zhuowen. He could only fight him head-on, hoping to stall for time and allow Whitebrow Heavenly Sovereign to come to his aid in time. Fight! Nine-headed sacrifice. Huangfu Wudao roared as he formed a seal with both hands. 9 snake heads burst out from his body once again, and an even more terrifying and massive 9-headed snake emerged from his body. At the same time, Huangfu Wudao spat out a mouthful of blood. His face was as pale as snow. His 9-headed snake-armored soul had been destroyed by Zhuowen earlier, and it would probably take a long time for him to recover. However, Huangfu Wudao had summoned a 9-headed snake again, and this time, the 9-headed snake was much more terrifying than before. It was obvious that he had used some kind of secret technique, and the side effects of this secret technique were very likely to be extremely powerful. Zhuowen's dark golden eyes were filled with indifference and ruthlessness. He stomped his foot and suddenly leaped up. After transforming into his dragon man form, Zhuowen's movements were much more agile and nimble, and his mind was much calmer and clearer than before. Break for me! With a loud roar, Zhuowen's massive dragon tail swung out from behind him, and a terrifying pressure flowed out from the dragon tail. It was the pressure of a dragon, and it was extremely terrifying. The 9-headed snake, which originally had a ferocious expression, revealed a trace of fear after sensing the dragon pressure. Boom! The dragon tail slammed into the 9-headed snake, causing it to fall to the ground. Then, Zhuowen leaped up and landed on the 9-headed snake's body. His hands, which were covered in dragon scales, suddenly reached into the 9-headed snake's body, and then pulled with both hands. Roar! The 9-headed snake wailed, and actually instantly collapsed, and was annihilated under this terrifying force. At the same time, Zhuowen transformed into a black shadow and arrived before Huangfu Wudao, and his right hand suddenly lifted Huangfu Wudao up. A punch landed on Huangfu Wudao's lower abdomen, and a terrifying force erupted. Huangfu Wudao didn't even have time to groan before he exploded into a cloud of blood mist. In his dragon man form, Zhuowen's strength was too terrifying. He almost possessed a portion of a true dragon's might and strength. This strength was extremely powerful for a cultivator. Therefore, Huangfu Wudao exploded into a cloud of blood mist under Zhuowen's punch. There was basically no chance of survival. Ah, little bastard. You actually dared to kill the crown prince. You're dead meat. Seeing Huangfu Wudao die in front of him, Heavenly Venerate Whitebrow's face was extremely gloomy. His eyes were scarlet red, and his rage was monstrous. Rumble! At the same time, the terrifying origin energy palm had completely arrived above Zhuowen's head. The terrifying power crushed down, and it actually intended to completely annihilate Zhuowen. Chapter 847. Frantically fleeing Azura Blood Sea. Divine Sun Cauldron Burn. Zhuowen's eyes were dark gold, and there was a hint of madness in his eyes. With a wave of the blood spear in his hand, a terrifying sea of blood unscrupulously surged towards the sky. As for the divine sun cauldron floating behind Zhuowen, it released an extremely terrifying sun fire that continuously gushed out, forming an extremely powerful and terrifying wall of fire above Zhuowen's head. Boom! The gigantic yuan power palm instantly came crashing down, heavily slamming against the sea of blood and the wall of fire, following which, a terrifying ring-shaped air wave spread out in all directions, forming into clusters of spiraling hurricanes. The surrounding warriors all revealed looks of shock. Before the terrifying wave of air arrived, they all retreated hundreds of meters away. Boom! The moment these warriors left, the wave of air spread out, and the buildings around the huge street all collapsed. The area within a radius of dozens of miles had almost become a vacuum. Only the huge palm of origin energy, the sea of blood, and the wall of fire were in a stalemate. Bang! The palm of origin energy shattered, but Zhuowen spat out a mouthful of blood. With a wave of his right hand, he kept the blood spear and the divine sun cauldron into his spirit ring. Following the direction he flew backwards, he unfurled his 3 pairs of lightning wings, turned into a bolt of lightning, and directly left this place. He actually blocked Empyrean Whitebrow's attack. This person is so terrifying. Looking at the shattered palm of origin energy, the surrounding people all sucked in a breath of cold air. Empyrean Whitebrow was a true Empyrean powerhouse, while Zhuowen was only a peak warrior of the Xuanzuan realm. Logically speaking, it was impossible for a warrior of the Xuanzuan realm to block the attack of an Empyrean realm powerhouse. Even if it was a casual attack, the Xuanzuan realm would not be able to block it. However, Zhuowen had done it. Although he was injured, he had indeed done it. How could everyone not be shocked? The face of the youth in the middle of the crowd was flushed red, and his eyes were filled with excitement and passion. A young talent like Zhuowen was the kind of genius that he revered. He was much stronger than Zhuowen, but at the same time, he was a little worried. Celestial Lord Whitebrow was too strong, and he didn't know if Zhuowen could escape. Trying to escape? Do you think it's that easy? Empyrean Lord Whitebrow bellowed angrily. With a stomp of his foot, he turned into a hurricane and chased after Zhuowen. Damn it! Why is this Empyrean Whitebrow's speed so fast? Zhuowen, who had unfurled 3 pairs of lightning wings, and whose speed had soared to the extreme, also noticed the Whitebrow Tianzuan, who was continuously closing in behind him. His heart sank with a thump. As he fled, Zhuowen's injuries rapidly healed with the terrifying regenerative abilities of the Hades King's heart. With Zhuowen's current regenerative abilities, he would basically be able to recover very quickly if he was given some time, as long as he did not harm his core. However, Empyrean Lord Whitebrow was a heavenly venerate after all. Although Zhuowen's lightning wings were blessed by nature, and his speed was extremely fast, it was not enough in front of a heavenly venerate. Seeing that Empyrean Lord Whitebrow was constantly closing in on him, Zhuowen's heart sank. Kid, let me borrow your lightning wings. Suddenly, Xiaohei's voice rang out in Zhuowen's mind. Subsequently, Zhuowen was shocked to discover that a deep black fog had surged out from between his eyebrows and was attached to the surface of the 3 pairs of lightning wings. When the black fog dissipated, the 3 pairs of lightning wings had changed beyond recognition. They no longer existed in the form of lightning, but had become 3 pairs of black dragon wings. Moreover, the 3 pairs of dragon wings were extremely large. When they were unfurled, they were 100 feet long. A gentle flap could sweep out a terrifying hurricane. Whiz! The 3 pairs of dragon wings suddenly opened and closed. Immediately, Zhuowen's speed increased by more than 10 times. Originally, when Empyrean Lord Whitebrow was about to close in on Zhuowen, he was shocked to discover that Zhuowen's speed had increased explosively at some point in time, leaving him far behind. With a few leaps, he disappeared from Empyrean Lord Whitebrow's line of sight. Whiz! In the sky above a rather lively street, Empyrean Lord Whitebrow suddenly descended into the air. He looked around, and his expression became even more unsightly. The people on the street also discovered the descending Empyrean Lord Whitebrow, especially the terrifying aura on his body, causing many of the martial warriors on the street to reveal expressions of fear. Did you see a martial warrior with 3 wings on his back pass by here just now? Empyrean Lord Whitebrow's expression was ugly as he looked down at the people on the street and asked coldly. Many of the martial warriors on the street revealed looks of doubt. There were also many people who shook their heads. Clearly, they did not see the person that Empyrean Lord Whitebrow was talking about. If you don't know, then all of you can go to hell as well. Empyrean Lord Whitebrow coldly snorted as his right hand suddenly smashed down. A huge amount of elemental energy condensed and transformed into a huge palm that was thousands of feet tall, enveloping the entire street. Boom! The entire street was directly turned into ruins by the palm of elemental energy. As for the many martial warriors on the street, they all exploded into clouds of blood mist. Not a single one of them survived. Looking at the street that had turned into ruins, Empyrean Lord Whitebrow frowned slightly. Just now, he had sensed that Zhuowen, whose speed had suddenly increased, had disappeared here. He suspected that Zhuowen was hiding on this street, which was why he decisively destroyed the entire street. His goal was to force out Zhuowen. Of course, it would be best if he could kill him together. However, what made Empyrean Lord Whitebrow frown was that the martial warriors on this street were actually destroyed by him without any resistance. Clearly, Zhuowen was not on this street. Otherwise, with Zhuowen's terrifying speed, it was very likely that he would have left the street before he attacked. The imperial capital was very large, and the streets inside were crisscrossed. The moment Empyrean Lord Whitebrow destroyed the entire street, the martial warriors on the surrounding streets all gathered around the ruins of the street. That's Empyrean Lord Whitebrow from the imperial family. What's going on? Why did Empyrean Lord Whitebrow destroy this street without distinguishing between right and wrong? The surrounding martial warriors all revealed indignant looks. Empyrean Lord Whitebrow's indiscriminate killing of the innocent had clearly aroused public anger. However, everyone only dared to be angry, but did not dare to say anything. Empyrean Lord Whitebrow was an Empyrean powerhouse. How could they afford to offend him? After all, he was powerful and had a powerful imperial family behind him. They did not dare to criticize him. Looking coldly at the surrounding martial warriors, Empyrean Lord Whitebrow released his powerful mind instructs. He wanted to see if Zhuowen's aura was hidden among the surrounding people. To his disappointment, Zhuowen's aura seemed to have completely disappeared after entering the street. Even the surrounding martial warriors did not have the slightest bit of Zhuowen's aura. Cunning brat! With a cold snort, Empyrean Lord Whitebrow flicked his sleeve and stepped on the air. He left this place and headed towards the imperial capital. He needed to report what had happened here to Emperor Qing. After Empyrean Lord Whitebrow left, in the crowd around the ruins, an ordinary middle-aged man with a sallow complexion revealed a smile. This middle-aged man was Zhuowen, who had used the 100 transformation divine art to change his appearance and aura. Looking at the departing figure of Empyrean Lord Whitebrow, Zhuowen's eyes flickered, and he also quietly left this place. I really didn't expect that there would be an Empyrean realm expert in the imperial family. On the way, Zhuowen muttered to himself in a low voice. Since the imperial family has an Emperor Power Realm expert like Emperor Qing, there will definitely be an Empyrean realm expert. Moreover, I'm afraid that there will be more than one Empyrean realm expert. The imperial family of the Qing Xian Empire is not such a simple force. Xiao Hei's cautious voice sounded. Hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. He was even more vigilant against the imperial family. Just as Xiao Hei had said, the imperial family could not only have Empyrean Lord Whitebrow. It was very likely that there were other Empyrean realm experts. It seemed that this trip to the imperial capital dungeon to save someone might become extremely difficult and troublesome. Kid, right now the imperial capital dungeon is undoubtedly a tiger's den. Even with the support of Elder Shiwan, I'm afraid it's impossible for you to save Lu Hantian. Xiao Hei suddenly said in a serious tone. Zhuowen's eyes flickered as he said faintly, I must break into the imperial capital dungeon. Now, let's go and check out the location of the imperial capital dungeon first. After saying that, Zhuowen did not say anything else. Instead, he rushed toward the northwest of the imperial capital. Just as the map had said, there was a large wasteland in the northwest of the imperial capital. In the center of the wasteland, there was a rather towering rockery. Around the rockery, there were groups of armored guards with surging auras. They held weapons and were constantly patrolling around the rockery. What surprised Zhuowen was that the guards patrolling around the rockery were all above the ultimate emperor realm. Among them, the leader of the guards had a cultivation of the Xuanzun realm. This was only the periphery of the imperial capital dungeon. There were probably more experts in the imperial capital dungeon, and they were even more powerful. After briefly inspecting the surroundings of the imperial capital dungeon, Zhuowen's gaze became extremely serious. He restrained his aura and quietly left the place. After a few leaps and confirming that no one was following him, he turned and headed toward the Drunken Spring Pavilion. After arriving at the Drunken Spring Pavilion, Zhuowen secretly entered the courtyard where Moyan Wuxiang was. Ding! The crisp sound of a zither suddenly rang out. It was like a high mountain and flowing water, permeating the entire courtyard. In the pavilion in the center of the courtyard, Moyan Wuxiang was sitting in front of the zither with a smile, looking at Zhuowen. Miss Wuxiang, Zhuowen has taken the liberty of trespassing this time. Zhuowen cupped his hands and came in front of Moyan Wuxiang. His expression was somewhat guilty. Moyan Wuxiang shook her head and said, "Young Master Zhuo is too serious. This time, you must have come to the imperial capital dungeon, right?" Nodding, Zhuowen did not beat around the bush. Instead, he said straightforwardly, "I don't ask Miss Wuxiang to help me save people. I just hope Miss Wuxiang can tell me a thing or two about the true strength of the imperial capital. Other than Emperor Qing, there are other experts in the imperial capital." Moyan Wuxiang heard this and raised her eyebrows. She smiled and said, "It seems that you are not a reckless person. I ask Miss Wuxiang to tell me a thing or two," Zhuowen said seriously. "I will naturally tell you about this matter, but we should first go to the inn where you and Elder Shiwan are staying," Moyan Wuxiang suddenly said. Zhuowen was stunned. He did not understand the meaning of Moyan Wuxiang's words. He blurted out, "Miss Wuxiang, what do you mean? Of course I want to go with you to save people. With your current strength, isn't saving people just sending yourself to death? If you die, elder sister Chen Shui will be sad to death." Chapter 848. 9 Orifices. Golden Pilzhuan brought Moyan Wuxiang and left Drunk Spring Pavilion quietly. After a while, the two of them arrived at the inn that Zhuowen had booked. Creak. The door was slowly closed. In the huge room, only Elder Shiwan was sitting beside the tea table, quietly sipping his tea. The sound of the door opening naturally attracted Elder Shiwan's attention. He looked a little wary. However, when he saw that it was Zhuowen, Elder Shiwan's expression softened. He looked at Moyan Wuxiang, who was beside Zhuowen, suspiciously. "Zhuo Xiaoyu, are you injured? Did anything happen on your way to the Imperial City dungeon?" Elder Shiwan looked at Zhuowen and asked with concern. Zhuowen shook his head and said, "It's just a small injury. It's not a big deal. Elder Shiwan, let me introduce you. This is Miss Moyan Wuxiang. She will be assisting me in saving people in the Imperial City dungeon." "Oh, it's Miss Moyan Wuxiang." Elder Shiwan looked at Moyan Wuxiang with a strange look in his eyes. After pondering for a while, he smiled and cupped his hands together. "I have heard of Elder Shiwan's name for a long time. However, I have never met you before. Now that I have met you, you are indeed extraordinary. No wonder you were able to fight with Emperor Qing back then," Moyan Wuxiang said with a smile. Elder Shiwan waved his hand and said, "Miss Wuxiang, you are exaggerating. Back then, Emperor Qing had deliberately held back. You can't take it seriously. If we really want to compare, I am not as good as you, Miss Wuxiang." Moyan Wuxiang's beautiful eyes narrowed slightly. Suddenly she smiled and said, "Elder Shiwan, you must be joking. How can I be compared to you? Let's discuss the matter of saving people first." Elder Shiwan looked deeply at Moyan Wuxiang and nodded. He said, "Miss Wuxiang is right. Let's discuss the matter of saving people first." Looking at the strange conversation between Moyan Wuxiang and Elder Shi Yuan, Zhuowen narrowed his eyes. It seemed that Elder Shi Yuan knew something about Moyan Wushang's identity. And looking at Elder Shi Yuan, Moyan Wushang wasn't just a simple student of Jiaxin College. After all, Mu Qinxue was the saintess of the Burning Heaven sect. And Moyan Wushang seemed to have a good relationship with Mu Qinxue. He knew that Moyan Wushang's identity was definitely not ordinary. However, Zhuowen didn't dwell on Moyan Wushang's identity. After all, Moyan Wushang had taken the initiative to help him save people. Zhuowen couldn't ask too many questions. Miss Wushang, can you tell me about the experts in the imperial family? Zhuowen suddenly asked with a smile. Moyan Wushang nodded and said, sure. The Qingxian Empire has been passed down for close to 1,000 years, and its foundation can be considered to be extremely strong. Then, Moyan Wushang explained the power of the imperial family to Zhuowen and Elder Shi Yuan in detail. The more Zhuowen and Elder Shi Yuan listened, the uglier their faces became. As everyone knew, the strongest person in the imperial family was Emperor Qing. He was also the only emperor realm expert in the imperial family. His cultivation was unparalleled, and no one in the imperial family could compete with him. In addition, there were 5 celestial masters in the imperial family. They were Celestial Master Huang Jiao, Celestial Master Ziyang, Celestial Master Shiyu, Celestial Master Guanghan, and Celestial Master Bai Mei, who had chased after Zhuowen. Among the 5 holy masters, Ziyang Tianzuan was the strongest. He was at the peak of the holy master realm, and his strength was on par with Lu Hantian. Holy Master Bai Mei was the weakest. He was at the early stage of the Holy Master realm. If the one chasing after Zhuowen today was Emperor Ziyang, even if Zhuowen had many tricks up his sleeve and used all his trump cards, it would be difficult for him to escape. Fortunately, the one he encountered was the weakest of the 5 Emperors, Emperor Whitebrow. In addition to the 5 heavenly venerables, the imperial family had more than 20 golden venerables and more than 100 martial venerables. This was an extremely terrifying force. It should be known that among the 5 great clans, the most powerful clan leader was probably only a golden exalt. However, the imperial family not only had 5 heavenly exalts, but also more than 20 golden exalts. The imperial family is too powerful. The 3 of us are weak. If we fight them head-on, it will be like hitting a rock with an egg. Hearing Moyan Wushang's introduction, Elder Shi Yuan frowned. He was worried. At first, he did not know that the imperial family was so powerful. Now that he knew, he began to hesitate. Zhuowen's face did not look good. Elder Shi Yuan was right. After listening to Moyan Wushang's introduction, he finally understood how terrifying the imperial family was. The imperial family's power is indeed terrifying. Of course, we can't fight them head-on. Zhuowen, don't you have the 100 transformation technique? Moreover, we are only saving people, not going head-on against the imperial family. So, you don't have to be so pessimistic. The most important part of this rescue is you, Zhuowen. With the 100 transformation technique, you can use the secret method to sneak into the dungeon and wait for an opportunity to make a move. After you rescue Lu Hantian, you can also release the other prisoners in the dungeon. You should know that the prisoners in the Imperial City Dungeon are all famous experts. As the Imperial City Dungeon has a total of 18 floors, the deeper the dungeon, the more terrifying the warriors are. If you can release those warriors, I think you and Lu Hantian will have a great chance of escaping. Moyan Wushang's lips curled up. Her beautiful eyes were full of a sly smile, as if her idea was very fun. Zhuowen's eyes lit up. Moyan Wushang's idea was good. He, Zhuowen, could not compete with the imperial family's power. However, the prisoners in the Imperial City Dungeon were all powerful warriors. If they were released, it would be enough to create chaos for the imperial family. Once the imperial family's experts were in chaos, Zhuowen and Lu Hantian's chances of escaping would be greatly increased. Zhuowen, if I'm not wrong, your current cultivation should have reached the peak of the Xuanzuan realm. You're only 1 step away from advancing to the Supreme Being realm, right? Moyan Wushang suddenly asked. Zhuowen nodded and said, my cultivation has indeed advanced to the peak of the Xuanzuan realm. However, advancing to the Supreme Being realm in a short period of time is not very possible. Moyan Wuxiang's lips curled. She stretched out her slender hand and opened it in front of Zhuowen. A shining golden pill the size of a thumb appeared in front of Zhuowen. Moreover, Zhuowen discovered that there were actually 9 small holes on the surface of this thumb-sized pill. From each of the holes, a refreshing medicinal fragrance wafted out, causing one to feel refreshed upon smelling it. This is the 9 Orifices Golden Pill. It can help you break through the shackles of the realm in a short period of time. Moyan Wuxiang's clear voice slowly rang out. 9 Orifices Golden Pill? It can actually help me break through the shackles of the realm in a short period of time. It's actually so miraculous. Looking at the golden pill in Moyan Wuxiang's palm, Zhuowen's eyes revealed a trace of surprise. Generally speaking, pills and elixirs that could help people break through were extremely precious and rare. Every one of them was priceless. This 9 Orifices Golden Pill could help the experts of the Xuanzun realm break through the shackles of the realm. Its value was even more precious. For a moment, Zhuowen was a little hesitant. Moyan Wuxiang chuckled and said, "This 9 Orifices Golden Pill is not mine. It was given to me by elder sister Chen Shui for safekeeping. When you reach the Xuanzun realm, I'll give it to you. If it was me, I wouldn't be willing to give it to you." "Oh, it was given to you by Chen Shui." Zhuowen's pupils shrank, but his heart was moved. Mu Chen Shui had done enough for him. But he, Zhuowen, had never done anything useful for Mu Chen Shui. Moreover, because of the cold poison in Mu Chen Shui's body, she only had 3 years left to live. In these 3 years, Zhuowen had to rely on the flame melting art to successfully fuse the heavenly flame. This was the only thing Zhuowen could do for Mu Chen Shui. Without any hesitation, Zhuowen took the 9 Orifices Golden Pill from Moyan Wuxiang's hands and silently put it into his spiritual ring. There's no rush to save people. Zhuowen, you now have the 9 Orifices Golden Pill. Relying on this 9 Orifices Golden Pill, you can break through to the Supreme Realm in a short period of time. After you break through, you'll be more confident in saving people. Moyan Wuxiang said with a smile. Zhuowen nodded and said, "Then I'll have to thank Miss Wuxiang." After that, Zhuowen, Elder Shiwan, and Moyan Wuxiang discussed for a while before the 3 of them went back to their respective rooms. After returning to his room, Zhuowen silently sat cross-legged on the futon in his room. After spending some time to calm his aura, he flicked his finger and took out the 9 Orifices Golden Pill from his spiritual ring. The 9 Orifices Golden Pill was indeed magical. The 9 orifices on its surface were constantly inhaling and exhaling air, as if a person was breathing in air through their nostrils. I hope this 9 Orifices Golden Pill can help me break through. With his eyes sparkling, Zhuowen no longer held back and directly crushed the 9 Orifices Golden Pill. Suddenly, a golden medicinal power filled the air. After that, Zhuowen opened all the major orifices in his body, and a swallowing force appeared, absorbing all the medicinal power into his body. Boom! A thunderous sound was heard. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed slightly, but his heart was moved. The 9 Orifices Golden Pill was indeed magical. The medicinal power was so strong that even he was a little shocked. After stabilizing his mind, Zhuowen stopped thinking about random things. He closed his eyes and began to silently refine the medicinal power that had been absorbed by the orifices in his body. While Zhuowen was silently refining the medicinal effects to break through, the imperial city was in a mess. Rumors of the first Prince Huangfu Wudao and the imperial guards being completely wiped out began to spread throughout the imperial city. It was a hubbub, and there was no end to it. In the throne room, Emperor Qing stood silently in the center of the main hall. Behind him stood 5 figures. One of the 5 figures had long black and white hair and snow-white eyebrows. It was Celestial Master White Eyebrows, who was chasing after Zhuowen. The other 4 were the other 4 Celestial Masters of the imperial family. At this moment, Celestial Master White Eyebrows knelt on one knee behind Emperor Qing. His forehead was covered with fine beads of sweat. His right hand, which was supporting him on the ground, was trembling slightly. It showed that Celestial Master White Eyebrows was nervous at this moment. Wudao has been killed. Furthermore, he was killed by a junior, who was also at the mystique venerable rank? Who is that junior? Emperor Qing's back was still facing the 5 celestial masters, but his voice gradually became cold. Chapter 849. Sovereign Realm. A genius who is older than Wu Dao? Furthermore, he didn't show off in the past? Emperor Qing narrowed his eyes as he muttered to himself. A trace of suspicion surfaced in his heart. He suspected that the person who had killed Huangfu Wu Dao and the Imperial Guards was Zhuowen. Although the appearance of the young man described by Heavenly Venerate by Mei was completely different from Zhuowen, Emperor Qing knew that if Qing Xian Empire really had such a terrifying genius, it was impossible for him not to know. Coupled with what Aoki had said previously about Zhuowen's traces in Muqing County, Emperor Qing was even more certain that the young man with the bloody spear was Zhuowen. He's growing so fast. He can even kill a golden venerate like Li Jin. Zhuowen must have obtained some sort of secret in the dragon vein. I must capture him. Emperor Qing's eyes were blazing as he thought to himself. The white-brow celestial exalt was rather uneasy. He stared at the Azure Emperor in surprise and doubt and said softly, "Your Majesty, why don't I lead the Imperial Army to search the entire Imperial capital? I swear I will capture that damned young man." Emperor Qing shook his head and said, "There's no need. If I'm not wrong, the young man with the bloody spear should be the Zhuowen we're looking for." Heavenly Venerate by Mei and the other 4 Heavenly Venerates' eyes flickered as they revealed a strange look. They had naturally heard of Zhuowen. That was because the Cyan Emperor had summoned them for the sake of the younger generation called Zhuowen. Moreover, what surprised them even more was that the Cyan Emperor actually planned to have the 5 of them guard the Imperial prison for the sake of Zhuowen. Just for a junior, the 5 Heavenly Venerates actually had to guard the Imperial City's dungeon at the same time. In the beginning, they had thought that Emperor Qing was making a mountain out of a molehill. Now they realized that Zhuowen was indeed quite capable, as he had actually escaped from Heavenly Venerate by Mei. Even so, they didn't really care about Zhuowen. After all, Heavenly Venerate Whitebrow had been able to put Zhuowen in such a miserable state. Furthermore, Heavenly Venerate Whitebrow was the weakest among the 5 Heavenly Venerates. Hence, it was indeed a little excessive for the 5 of them to guard together. Don't underestimate that Zhuowen. According to Empyrean Whitebrow's description, that Zhuowen might have a secret technique that can change his appearance and aura. So we can't be careless. And Prince Aoki also plans to invite the 2 Grand Elders of the Blue Dragon Hall to guard the Imperial City's underground prison with the 5 of you. This time, after Zhuowen walks into the trap, we must capture him completely. But remember, you must capture him alive. If any of you kill Zhuowen, you will be buried with him. At this point, Emperor Qing's voice became extremely cold. A terrifying pressure faintly flowed out from his body, causing the faces of the 5 Heavenly Venerates to change slightly. At this moment, the 5 Heavenly Venerates were truly shocked. Even the Hall Master of the Blue Dragon Hall, Aoki, and the 2 Grand Elders actually wanted to guard the Imperial City's underground prison with them. 8 Heavenly Venerates joining forces to guard the Imperial City's underground prison, just for a junior whose cultivation was only in the Xuanzuan realm. Wasn't this too terrifying? Especially when they felt the faintly discernible and powerful coldness from the Azure Emperor. The 5 Celestial Venerables all had solemn expressions. They could completely feel that the Azure Emperor valued Zhuo, one to a degree that far exceeded their expectations. Don't worry, Your Majesty. With us 8 Heavenly Venerates here, even if a fly enters the Imperial City's underground prison, we can make it unable to return, let alone Zhuowen. The 5 Heavenly Venerates said cautiously. Yes, you guys go to the Imperial City's underground prison first. Zhuowen will probably receive news that Lu Hantian is imprisoned in the underground prison very soon. It won't be long before he will walk right into the trap. Emperor Qing nodded and said with a wave of his sleeve. The 5 Heavenly Venerates respectfully cupped their hands and bowed. Soon after, they slowly left the hall. Soon, only Emperor Qing's figure was left in the hall. Emperor Qing stood silently in the hall with a deep gaze. No one knew what he was thinking at this moment. Huangfu Wudao was the next successor that Emperor Qing had personally promoted. Emperor Qing had cultivated Huangfu Wudao with great care, while Li Jin and the imperial guards were his personal guards. They were his usual left and right hands. However, Emperor Qing's eyes did not reveal the slightest bit of anger when he heard that Huangfu Wudao and the imperial guards had been killed by Zhuowen. In other words, Emperor Qing did not care at all. Zhuowen, you won't be able to escape. Whether it is the dragon soul in your body or the secret of the dragon vein, you will spit it all out. An indifferent voice rang out in the hall. Soon after, Emperor Qing's figure disappeared into the shadows of the hall. Emperor Qing clearly knew that the imperial city's underground prison, which was guarded by 8 heavenly venerates, was like an airtight moat. No matter who broke into the underground prison, it was impossible to escape. He was very confident that Zhuowen would definitely overestimate himself and break into the imperial city's underground prison for Lu Hantian. Even if it was a trap that Emperor Qing had set for him, Zhuowen would still risk his life and fall into it. This was because he clearly knew that regardless of whether it was Zhuowen or Lu Hantian, they were both people who valued relationships. Since they were people who valued relationships, they would have a weakness. If he could grasp this weakness, he, Emperor Qing, would be in an invincible position. 3 days quickly passed. When the first ray of sunlight shone down on the morning of the 3rd day, Zhuowen, who was silently sitting cross-legged on a praying mat, slowly opened his eyes. Boom! A thunder-like sound burst out from his body. An extremely terrifying aura spread and swept across the entire space. It actually caused countless vortexes to appear and fill the entire space. At this moment, Zhuowen's eyes were shining like stars in the night sky. There was an extremely rich joy in them. I have broken through. I have finally broken through from the peak of the Xuanzuan realm to the sovereign realm. Slowly getting up, Zhuowen stretched his muscles and bones. He could clearly feel that the strength in his body had become stronger. After advancing to the sovereign realm, Zhuowen's strength had increased by at least several times. If he were to meet Heavenly Venerate Whitebrow again, although he would still be no match for him, at least Zhuowen would not be chased by Whitebrow Heavenly Venerate like last time. After pushing open the door, Zhuowen called Elder Shiwan and Moyan Wushang, who were staying in the other 2 rooms, out. Elder Shiwan and Moyan Wushang were surprised that Zhuowen had broken through so quickly. However, they were not too surprised. They had seen Zhuowen's talent. In addition, Zhuowen was a descendant of the Ryuka, who possessed the dragon soul. He had a unique and powerful talent. Hence, they felt that it was reasonable for Zhuowen to advance. After the 3 of them discussed the rescue mission, they decided to take action tonight. The plan was very simple. That was to let Zhuowen be the vanguard and sneak into the Imperial City dungeon to wait for an opportunity to take action. After stirring up the situation in the Imperial City dungeon, they would take advantage of the chaos to rescue Lu Hantian and Moyan Wushang. Elder Shiwan and Moyan Wushang would be waiting outside the dungeon. After the discussion, the 3 of them went back to make preparations to deal with the rescue mission tonight. A day passed quickly. Night slowly fell. The land that was originally shining brightly was now shrouded in darkness. Only the twinkling stars provided a weak light. Pitter patter patter. The rain fell slowly from the sky. It was getting heavier and heavier. The sound of the rain was like thunder, resounding throughout the land. It was so mighty. Swoosh, swoosh, swoosh. In this heavy and rainy night, 3 figures silently flew towards the northwest of the imperial capital. Their movements were very light and careful. Wherever they passed, they did not attract anyone's attention at all. Very soon, the 3 figures arrived at the wasteland in the northwest. The 3 of them silently curled up in a thicket several dozen meters away from the fake mountain at the center of the wasteland. They stared at the fake mountain several dozen kilometers away. At this moment, the rain was pouring down and the sound of the rain could be heard everywhere. However, outside the wasteland, there were still groups of soldiers in armor. They were tirelessly patrolling and were not affected by the sound of the rain at all. The 3 people hiding in the bushes were naturally Zhuowen, Elder Shiwan and Moyan Wushang. At this moment, the 3 of them looked dignified. They could clearly feel that the security around the wasteland was much stricter than usual. Zhuowen, the Imperial City dungeon is now heavily guarded. If you want to sneak in, I'm afraid it will be much more difficult than usual. Elder Shiwan said with a dignified look. Zhuowen had also expected this problem. He said to Elder Shiwan, "If you want to sneak in, you have to disguise yourself as one of the patrolling soldiers. I'm afraid that ordinary soldiers are not qualified to enter the dungeon. If you want to disguise yourself, you have to disguise yourself as the commander of the soldiers." Elder Shiwan pondered for a moment and continued, "I'll follow you to the wasteland. Let's capture the commander of the soldiers first." Zhuowen nodded and silently walked toward the wasteland with Elder Shiwan. With their cultivation, it was a piece of cake for them to not attract the attention of the patrolling soldiers around the wasteland. After a while, the two of them hid in a dark corner around the wasteland when the patrolling soldiers were not paying attention. As it was a rainy night, and the corner that the two of them had chosen was very remote, it was like a blind spot. The soldiers who passed by could not see the two of them hiding in the corner. Just now, I used my mental strength to check. There are a total of 20 patrolling soldiers scattered around the wasteland. The distance between each team is 30 meters. What we need to do now is to wait for the best opportunity, Elder Shiwan said to Zhuowen through telepathy. Zhuowen nodded. The two of them stood in the corner of the wasteland and waited silently. After a while, a team slowly passed by the corner where Zhuowen and Elder Shiwan were. Ding dong! The sound of a stone falling to the ground suddenly rang out, causing the team to stop. Immediately, the leader of the team squinted his eyes and silently stared at the corner where the sound came from. "Who is there?" the leader of the soldiers asked coldly. Chapter 850. Into the dungeon. The soldier commander's eyes were full of solemnity as he tiptoed into the dark corner. The moment he stepped into the darkness, his eyes became blurred, and he froze on the spot. Following this, a huge force came over and a hand pulled him in. Then, the hand covered the soldier's mouth without any hesitation. With a slight cracking sound, the soldier died a violent death. In a dark corner, Zhuowen and Elder Shiwan looked at each other. Then, Zhuowen quickly took off the leader's armor and put it on himself. After putting on the uniform of the leader of the soldiers, Zhuowen's face suddenly squirmed and changed. In the end, he took on the appearance of the leader of the soldiers, and his aura was almost identical to the latter's. Outside the fake mountain, the soldiers who were originally standing in place all frowned slightly. Their leader had already been in the shadow of the fake mountain for some time, but he still hadn't come out. Could it be that something had happened? Why hasn't the leader come out yet? Let's go and take a look. The soldier at the front frowned slightly and said to the team behind him. After obtaining the approval of the group, the soldiers slowly approached the shadow in the corner. Their expressions became extremely vigilant. Their leader had been in there for a long time and still hadn't come out. Something must have happened. Therefore, these soldiers became extremely vigilant. If there was any trouble, they wouldn't be lenient. Just as they were about to approach the shadow in the corner, a figure slowly walked out, causing many of the soldiers to become nervous. The soldier in the lead even coldly shouted, "Who is it?" "It's me. Don't tell me you can't even recognize me? Didn't I tell you to stay put and wait? Why are you all here?" A cold and indifferent voice was transmitted over. Soon after, this figure finally appeared in front of the soldiers. Wasn't this the leader, who had been investigating the shadows in this corner? "So it's Lord Chief. Just now, we saw that you hadn't come out for a long time, so we were worried about your safety and took the initiative to come and check. What did you find inside, sir?" the soldier in the lead hurriedly asked. The soldier leader nodded and said faintly, "I didn't find anything. The one who made the noise should be a crafty rabbit that accidentally passed by the rockery. Other than that, there are no other abnormalities." When the other soldiers heard this, they all nodded, but they were rather puzzled. However, the person in front of them was their leader, so they didn't ask too much. "Let's go. You all continue to patrol. I need to go into the dungeon." The soldier leader waved his hand and said to the group of soldiers. The group didn't suspect anything. and ordinary soldiers could only patrol around, was the only one who could enter the dungeon. Was the soldier leader of the dungeon. And the dungeon, was dungeon. Dungeon studio art. Dungeon master studio of the dungeon, was art studio dungeon dungeon studio. Dungeon duns. Soul studio. Soul dungeon soul done. Was. Dungeon. Soul from the memories of the leader of the soldiers. Zhuowen had a rather good understanding of the first floor of the dungeon. Besides, it was common for people like him to request to enter the dungeon. After all, the leader of the soldiers was also a human, and there were bound to be times when he was tired. Every time this happened, the leader of the soldiers would order the soldiers under him to continue patrolling, while they would enter the first floor of the dungeon to take a nap. Following his memory, Zhuowen quickly arrived at the entrance of the dungeon. The guard at the entrance glanced at Zhuowen indifferently, nodded, and let Zhuowen in. After entering the entrance, what appeared in front of Zhuowen was a rather deep passageway. On both sides of the passageway, there were rows of burning torches. Walking slowly in the corridor, Zhuowen tried his best to appear calm and indifferent. Fortunately, the leader of the soldiers that Zhuowen was disguised as was a person who did not like to talk much. Hence, his relationship with the other leaders was not very good. It was because of this that Zhuowen entered the dungeon with even more ease. After all, if the master that he was impersonating was someone who was good at talking and had good interpersonal relationships, once he entered the dungeon, he would probably talk nonsense with the other leaders. At that time, the chances of him giving himself away would be very high. Walking out of the corridor, on the other side of the corridor, there was a rather spacious stone hall. There were many simple tables and chairs in the hall. At this moment, there were already 5 figures sitting on the tables and chairs, chatting happily. These 5 people were naturally the leaders of the other teams. At this moment, Zhuowen's entrance also attracted the attention of the 5 of them. However, the 5 of them only glanced at Zhuowen before turning their heads and continuing their discussion. Towards the indifference of the 5 people, Zhuowen appeared to be very calm, but in his heart, he let out a sigh of relief. He did not want to talk too much with these people, otherwise, it would be easy for him to give himself away. Sitting on a chair, Zhuowen discovered that there was a rather sumptuous plate of wine and fruit on the table. It was obvious that it was a reward for the leaders of the soldiers. Silently drinking his wine, Zhuowen sized up the surroundings of the first floor of the dungeon. The first floor was located in the middle of the fake mountain, so it was filled with potholes, looking rather strange and ugly. On the surface of these potholes, there were rows of iron fences. With Zhuowen's current eyesight, he could see that there were many figures within the iron fences. Obviously, these potholes should be the place where the prisoners on the first floor were imprisoned. The strength of these prisoners was not strong, generally around the Earth King realm and Heavenly King realm. According to the dungeon layout map given by Moyan Wuxiang, Zhuowen knew that the Imperial City dungeon was divided into 18 floors. The deeper you went, the stronger the prisoners were. Therefore, Zhuowen would not act rashly now. After he sneaked into the depths of the dungeon and confirmed the location of Lu Hantian, he would try to release the powerful prisoners and create as much chaos as possible in the dungeon. In this stone hall, in addition to the entrance corridor that Zhuowen had entered, there was a deep corridor ahead. That corridor was the only way to the second floor. I really don't know what's going on. His Majesty Emperor Qing suddenly ordered all of us to be transferred to the Imperial City dungeon. Usually, there are only 5 teams patrolling the Imperial City dungeon, but in the past few days, there have been 20 teams patrolling the Imperial City dungeon. It's almost impenetrable. A man in blue with a pointy mouth and monkey-like cheeks grabbed a cup of wine and drank it in one gulp, complaining slightly. As soon as the blue-clothed man finished speaking, the burly man sitting opposite him suddenly said mysteriously, "You don't know. 20 teams are just appetizers. As far as I know, His Majesty Emperor Qing has even invited the 5 celestial masters of the imperial family. They are currently guarding the depths of the dungeon. What? Even the 5 celestial masters have come to guard the dungeon. Could it be that some strong enemy has invaded? As soon as these words were said, the other leaders were shocked. They did not expect that even the 5 celestial masters of the imperial family would come together to guard the dungeon. This was too exaggerated. It is said that the reason why His Majesty Emperor Qing has put on such a big show is mainly because of a young man named Zhuowen. You should have heard of this child, right? The burly man continued. I have indeed heard of him. He seems to be an extremely talented junior. Back then, the first prince, Huangfu Wudao, was almost defeated by this child. The other leaders nodded in agreement. Obviously, they were not unfamiliar with Zhuowen. They had all gone to watch the ranking battle back then, so they naturally knew who Zhuowen was. After Zhuowen disappeared for a period of time, he suddenly appeared in Muqing County in a domineering manner. Moreover, the strength that he erupted with was even more shocking. The elite experts that the Glan, Feng, Chao, and Blue Dragon Hall brought were all annihilated by this child. Among them were the Azure Dragon Guard Qing Yi, the Glan, Chao, and Feng family heads. Hearing this, the other leaders were really shocked. The Azure Dragon Guard Qing Yi, the Glan family head, Glan Haohai, Chao Ji, and Feng Tian were all experts in the initial stage of the Golden Venerate stage. They were famous experts in the Imperial City, but they had been annihilated by Zhuowen alone. What a joke! There is no doubt about it. It is said that this child is a descendant of the Ryuka and has an extremely powerful dragon soul in his body. Although his cultivation level is not very high, his strength is one of the best. The burly man curled his lips and said. Hearing this, the others revealed a look of relief. No wonder Zhuowen was so terrifying. It turned out that he was a descendant of the Ryuka with a powerful dragon soul. It was no wonder that he could kill a Golden Venerate stage expert. 10,000 years ago, the Ryuka had ruled the eastern lands for tens of thousands of years. Even though the Ryuka had disappeared for tens of thousands of years, the younger generation of ancient martial artists still had a deep impression of the Ryuka experts. Everyone knew that Ryuka ancient martial artists could awaken a dragon soul. And a dragon soul was a powerful armor soul that was superior to other armor souls. 10,000 years ago, those Ryuka ancient martial artists, who had awakened a powerful dragon soul, could challenge other Golden Venerate stage experts after their cultivation level reached the 4 Venerate stage. What was even more abnormal was that there were some peerless Ryuka ancient martial artists who were able to kill Heavenly Venerate stage experts when they were still in the Xuanzuan realm. When their cultivation level reached the Heavenly Venerate stage, they could even contend with an Emperor realm expert. It could be said that the Ryuka ancient martial artists were the epitome of terror 10,000 years ago. Thinking back to the glory of the Ryuka ancient martial artists, many ancient martial artists still sighed. Zhuowen, who was sitting at a table and thinking silently, narrowed his eyes. There was a trace of coldness in his eyes. The Qing Emperor had placed so much importance on Zhuowen's rescue mission that he had sent all 5 heavenly venerates of the imperial family to guard the dungeon. Slowly standing up, Zhuowen walked silently to the tunnel in front of him. He intended to enter the 2nd level, and he had to find out the location and news of Lu Hantian as soon as possible. Stop! Leader Huifeng, what are you trying to do? We are not qualified to enter the 2nd level. Chapter 851. Ice and Snow Prison. Slowly turning around, Zhuowen saw the 5 leaders in the stone hall staring at him with unfriendly gazes. He couldn't help but smile and say, "Sorry. I took the wrong path. I thought this tunnel was the way out." As he spoke, Zhuowen returned to the stone hall. When the 5 leaders, who were led by the burly man, heard this, their gazes became much gentler. When Zhuowen passed by the 5 leaders, a blood spear suddenly appeared in his hand. Then 5 blood-red rays cut through the air. Then the 5 leaders all froze on the spot, not moving at all. The 5 of them held their necks and narrowed their eyes. They turned their heads with difficulty and stared at Zhuowen, who was holding the blood spear in his hand. They muttered, "Leader Huifeng. You. Why?" Zhuowen frowned and said indifferently, because the real Huifeng is already dead. Then you are? The burly man's breath was weak, and he asked with difficulty. Weren't you all talking about me just now? Zhuowen slowly walked to the burly man's side and gently patted his shoulder. The burly man's eyes narrowed. He pointed at Zhuowen with his right hand and said intermittently, You are Zhuowen? Congratulations. You got it right. But there is no reward. Zhuowen nodded. Then, with a stomp of his foot, the fire of the sun instantly enveloped the 5 leaders. In the blink of an eye, the 5 of them were burned to ashes. After silently killing the 5 leaders, the prisoners who were locked up in the pits around the stone hall all had hopeful looks in their eyes. They knew that this person was definitely not a dungeon guard, and was most likely an expert who had come to break into the dungeon. Brother, I'm sorry. You killed the 5 leaders. If you are here to break into the dungeon, release us while you are at it. In the nearest pit, a sloppy man with shifty eyes stared at Zhuowen and said. As soon as this person's words came out, the other prisoners in the pit all looked at Zhuowen with hopeful eyes. They had been locked up in the dungeon for too long, and now they couldn't wait to escape. Zhuowen shook his head and said, Your strength is too weak. If you come out now, you will only be cannon fodder. Moreover, it will be easy to alert the enemy. After I come out from the depths of the dungeon, I will let you out. As he spoke, Zhuowen no longer paid any attention to the prisoners in the surrounding pits. Instead, he planned to head towards the tunnel in front of him. However, just as he was about to step into the tunnel, a sharp voice rang out. You have to let us out. Otherwise, I'll shout loudly to attract the attention of the other guards. Let's see how you're going to enter the depths of the dungeon. Turning his head to look, Zhuowen immediately discovered that the person who spoke was none other than the shifty-eyed man from before. Seeing that Zhuowen had really stopped in his tracks, the shifty-eyed man's eyes revealed a trace of pride as he continued. If you want to continue deeper into the dungeon, and don't want to alert the enemy, you'd better listen to me, and let us out first. Looks like you're courting death. You actually dare to threaten me. Zhuowen's eyes flashed with killing intent as a blood-red light flashed out. The shifty-eyed man didn't even let out a groan before exploding into a cloud of blood mist. Do all of you have the same thoughts as this person? Do you want me to let you out now? Once the shifty-eyed man died, Zhuowen stood proudly. He looked around at the other prisoners in the pit, and asked word by word. At this moment, these prisoners were already so scared that they didn't dare to make a sound. Instead, they hid in the depths of the pit, and stared at Zhuowen with extreme fear. Too ruthless, this man in front of them was too ruthless. They didn't want to die. Looking at the prisoners who had become quiet one by one, Zhuowen no longer paid any attention to them. With a step, he entered the tunnel, and quickly disappeared. Not long after entering the tunnel, Xiaohei's voice suddenly rang out in his mind. This dungeon actually contains an extremely pure dragon qi. Zhuowen's footsteps paused as he stood in the middle of the tunnel. His eyes revealed a look of surprise as he said, Dragon qi? How could there be dragon qi in the Imperial City's dungeon? I don't know either. I can only vaguely feel that dragon qi. It should be in the deepest part of the dungeon. This dragon qi is much weaker than a true dragon. I think it should be a dragon soul martial artist. Xiaohei said with some uncertainty. Dragon soul martial artist? Zhuowen's eyes revealed a trace of pondering. He had some guesses in his heart. He nodded and said, Let's go to the bottom of the dungeon first. Once we reach the bottom of the dungeon, we will naturally know what is hidden at the bottom of the dungeon. After saying that, Zhuowen continued to go deeper into the tunnel. Moreover, he became more vigilant and careful. He knew that as he went deeper into the dungeon, the guards he would encounter would definitely become stronger and more terrifying. Fortunately, Zhuowen had the 100 transformation technique. Not only could he change his appearance and aura, but he also had the ability to conceal his aura. Therefore, he still had a certain level of confidence in breaking into the depths of the dungeon. The entrance to the second floor is at the corner in front. There are 2 guards at the entrance. Moreover, there are 5 or 6 powerful martial artists on the second floor. Xiaohei said calmly. Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He nodded and slowly walked out of the corner. Sure enough, he saw a metal fence in front of him. There were two armored martial artists at the entrance. The auras of these two martial artists weren't weak. They should be at the ultimate emperor realm. At this moment, the two of them also noticed Zhuowen. They immediately pointed the spears in their hands at Zhuowen and said, "Which team are you the leader of? You don't have the right to enter the second floor." Zhuowen hurriedly revealed a trace of a flattering smile. He took out two high-grade spirit stones from his spirit ring and said, "Brothers, this is a small token of my appreciation. I am Huifeng. I have a friend who has committed a grave mistake and is being detained in this dungeon. Because I miss him so much, I wanted to come down and visit him." When they saw the high-grade spirit stones that Zhuowen stuffed into their hands, the corners of the two martial artists' lips curled up. The vigilance on their faces gradually receded as they said, "So it's Leader Huifeng. I really didn't expect that your friend would be detained in this dungeon. You should know that once someone is detained in this dungeon, it's basically impossible for them to leave. However, since you are Leader Huifeng's friend, we are not unreasonable people. If you are willing to give us a token of appreciation, we will let Leader Huifeng in." The two martial artists very unceremoniously put away the high-grade spirit stones. They stared at Zhuowen and spread out their right hands. Their meaning was extremely clear. One high-grade spirit stone was not enough. Zhuowen deliberately revealed a shocked and pained expression. He reluctantly took out two more high-grade spirit stones from his spirit ring and handed them to the martial artists. He said, "Brothers, you should know that the reward for being a patrol commander is not high. These are the last two high-grade spirit stones." When they saw Zhuowen's pained expression, the two martial artists nodded and accepted the spirit stones. They opened the metal fence and one of them said, "I will lead you to your cell. However, I must warn you, don't have any bad intentions. This is the Imperial City's dungeon. If you have any bad intentions, you will definitely not be able to leave." Yes. Of course, I am not tired of living." Zhuowen hurriedly smiled and said. One of the martial artists nodded and greeted the other martial artist. Then, he led Zhuowen to the second floor of the dungeon. The structure of the second floor was very different from the first floor. Because it was on the first floor, the structure of the second floor was much simpler than the first floor. "Leader Huifeng, may I know which cage your friend is in on the second floor?" Walking in front, the martial artist's attitude was much better than before. After all, he had taken other people's spirit stones and gained a lot of benefits. This martial artist naturally would not give others a hard time. "My friend should be in the 17th floor of the dungeon," Zhuowen suddenly said. "What? On the 17th floor?" The guard, who originally had a smile on his face, froze on the spot after hearing these words. Immediately, he slowly turned his head and immediately saw Zhuo Wenjing with a strange smile. Whoosh! A bloody light flashed past. The martial artist clutched his neck tightly and stared at Zhuowen. He was completely breathless. Even until his death, he did not know why Leader Huifeng wanted to kill him. After burning the martial artist's corpse to ashes, Zhuowen once again changed into the martial artist's appearance and walked out of the second floor of the dungeon. He headed towards the third floor of the dungeon. Zhuowen's speed was neither fast nor slow. Along the way, he used the 100 transformation technique. Zhuowen's appearance changed more than 10 times, and he gradually went deeper into the dungeon without making a sound. It was very clear that the people on the upper floors of the dungeon would soon notice that something was wrong. At that time, if they were delayed because of this, it would be even more difficult for him, Zhuowen, to move. Just as Zhuowen continued to go deeper into the dungeon, the 17th floor of the dungeon was dead silent. The space of the 17th floor of the dungeon was not big. It was only about 500 square meters. However, this space was filled with bone-chilling cold. Wisps of cold air spread out in the space like clouds and mist. The surface of the space was covered with extremely thick ice. This was simply a world of ice and snow. Moreover, this cold air was even more terrifying than ordinary Earth-level cold air. At the same time, there were a total of 4 cages condensed from ice in this ice and snow space. These 4 cages were suspended in midair. In these 4 suspended cages, there were 4 figures sitting cross-legged. If Zhuowen was in this ice and snow space, he would definitely be able to recognize a sloppy figure in one of the cages. This sloppy figure was none other than Lu Hantian, who had his cultivation sealed by Emperor Qing and was imprisoned in the dungeon. At this moment, Lu Hantian slowly opened his eyes. There was a glimmer of light in his eyes. Turning his head, Lu Hantian stared at the bottom of the ice and snow space. In the center of the ice and snow space, there was an extremely deep abyss. Senior, thank you for your teachings for so many days. If I, Lu Hantian, am able to break through to the next realm, I will definitely rescue you. Together, we will turn this imperial city upside down. As if he was muttering to himself, Lu Hantian uttered these inexplicable words and closed his eyes again. Chapter 852. Black Baron. Along the way, Zhuowen was extremely cautious. Coupled with the effects of the 100 transformations technique, Zhuowen was able to pass through layer after layer of dungeons without any mishaps. When Zhuowen used the transformation technique to transform into a guard on the 10th level of the Imperial City dungeon, the other guards finally realized that something was amiss. Hurried footsteps sounded continuously in the dungeon. The first 10 levels of the dungeon were in chaos, as the guards realized that some of the guards that they were familiar with had disappeared for no reason. Thump, 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 thump. The crisp sound of armor colliding with the ground was immediately heard from the passageway in front of the 10th level. Zhuowen, who was among the guards on the 10th level, looked calmly in the direction of the passageway. Very quickly, a group of cultivators dressed in black armor arrived at the hall of the 10th floor. The person in the lead was dressed in black armor, with strange beasts carved on it. His aura was extremely terrifying, and he was at least a supreme being. There were more than a dozen guards on the 10th level. At this moment, when the guards saw the group of martial artists coming in, their eyes were filled with fear and respect. Even the Black Beast army has been mobilized. What happened in the dungeon? The surrounding guards' eyes flickered and caused an uproar. They were obviously familiar with the group that had suddenly appeared, and were even a little fearful of them. Among the guards, Zhuowen also knew the origin and identity of the Black Beast army from the surrounding conversations. The Black Beast army was a powerful army that specialized in guarding the Imperial City dungeon. There were 4 teams with a total of 100 people. These 100 people were all at the Sovereign Realm and above. The 4 captains of the 4 teams were even powerful golden venerables. The reason why the Imperial City dungeon had always been impregnable was mainly because there was such a terrifying army hidden within. The guards outside the dungeon were only external personnel. The Black Beast army was the core strength of the dungeon. I am the captain of the 2nd team of the Black Beast army, Black Baron. Did any of your guards on the 10th level disappear for no reason? Black Baron was tall and strong. He looked around at the dozen guards with cold eyes and asked, "So it is Lord Black Baron. No guards on the 10th level have disappeared. I wonder what happened in the dungeon. Even Sir Dark Noble is here?" One of the guards asked cautiously. In the Imperial City's dungeon, apart from the 5 celestial venerables, the captain of the Black Beast army had the highest status. How could these guards dare to offend him in the slightest? Oh, are there no missing guards on the 10th floor? Looks like the intruder hasn't reached the 10th level yet. Dark Baron lowered his head and pondered for a moment before continuing. There are more than 10 guards missing from the first 9 floors of the dungeon. I'm afraid someone has broken into our dungeon. You don't have to worry about this anymore. Just continue with your own business. When the surrounding guards heard this, their eyes revealed a trace of shock. They did not expect that there would actually be someone who dared to trespass into the Imperial City's dungeon. Wasn't this courting death? Heiju carefully observed the surrounding guards. After confirming that there were no abnormalities, he divided the 25 Black Beast army soldiers into 2 teams. One team was to block the exit of the 9th floor, while the other team was to block the entrance of the 11th floor. I'd like to see what ability you have to enter the 10th level, Heiju muttered in a low voice. He silently leaned against a stone pillar next to him. His eyes were filled with a deep coldness. He dared to conclude that the intruder was most likely an expert who was extremely adept at concealing his aura. Since no guards had gone missing on the 10th floor, it was very likely that the intruder was on the 9th and 10th floors. After returning to his post, Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and sized up the Black Beast Army soldiers who had blocked the entrance and exit of the 10th floor. His mind was constantly thinking of countermeasures. The Black Beast Army was not simple, especially Dark Baron. His strength was probably more terrifying than Grand Haohai. With Zhuowen's current strength, it was very unlikely that he would be able to kill Dark Baron in an instant. However, if he did not eliminate the Black Beast Army, Zhuowen would not be able to continue deeper, let alone enter the 17th floor to save Lu Hantian. Boy, with your current status as a guard, you can silently approach Dark Baron. While he is not paying attention, if you erupt with your full strength, there is a great chance that you will be able to kill Dark Baron instantly. Xiao Hei's voice slowly sounded in his mind. Hearing this, Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He nodded and lifted his feet to walk towards Dark Baron. Dark Baron, who was resting with his eyes closed, suddenly opened his eyes at this moment. His cold eyes stared indifferently at Zhuowen and said, "What's the matter?" Zhuowen stopped in a timely manner, and a panicked expression appeared on his face as he said in a low voice, "Sir Dark Noble, there are some things that I didn't tell you before, and they may be very important to you." "Oh, what is it?" Black Noble's interest was piqued and he asked. This matter is very important. If you say it publicly, I'm afraid." Zhuowen was very timid, as if this matter was too important, so he had to be cautious. And it was precisely because of Zhuowen's behavior that Dark Baron became more and more interested. He nodded and said, "Then come closer and tell me." Zhuowen sighed softly and walked timidly to Dark Baron's side. At the same time, he carefully looked around as if he was afraid that someone would eavesdrop. Looking at Zhuowen's appearance, Dark Baron was a little amused. He waved his right hand, and a surge of yuan qi poured out, turning into a small barrier between the two. He continued, "Just say it. In this small barrier, no matter how loud you are, no one can eavesdrop." Zhuowen nodded gratefully and immediately approached Dark Baron and said softly, "Lord Dark Baron, in fact, what I want to say to you is..." Whoosh! A bloody light suddenly swept out from Zhuowen's palm, and then an extremely terrifying aura burst out. At this moment, Zhuowen used 4 heads and 8 arms, waving 8 spears, and using the Azura Blood Spear at the same time. At the same time, he also summoned the Divine Sun Cauldron. The terrifying fire of the sun burst out, and turned into a fire dragon that enveloped Dark Baron. Azura Blood Sea, Fire of the Sun. A terrifying sea of blood swept out from the void, enveloping the entire 10th floor of the dungeon. Apparently, Black Baron didn't know that Zhuowen was going to do something like this, so he wasn't prepared for it at all. He shouted loudly, and a terrifying yuanli gushed out. Waves of black energy swirled in the air, and turned into a black barrier in front of him. It was to block Zhuowen's attack. Unfortunately, after Zhuowen's cultivation reached the supreme realm, his strength was many times stronger than before. In addition, this attack was planned by Zhuowen, so Dark Baron was completely unprepared. Even this defense was only used temporarily. Kacha! The black barrier was as fragile as a piece of paper and directly shattered. Then, the fire of the sun and the Azura Blood Sea swept out and intertwined, enveloping Dark Baron in an instant. Dark Baron, a golden supreme realm powerhouse, didn't even make a sound. Under the combined attack of the fire of the sun and the Azura Blood Sea, he died without a trace. From Zhuowen's sudden attack to Dark Baron's death, only a blink of an eye had passed. In the 10th floor, whether it was the other guards or the Black Beast Army that blocked the entrance, they all stood in place in a daze. They all saw Heiju being killed in front of them so cleanly and neatly. Perhaps, they still couldn't believe that Dark Baron, the captain of the 2nd Division of the Black Beast Army, a mid-stage golden venerable powerhouse, was instantly killed by the guard who appeared. Among them, the most surprised were the guards who were in their positions. Wasn't the one who killed Dark Baron their companion, who guarded the 10th floor together with them? When did their companion become so powerful? He actually killed Dark Baron, the captain of the 2nd Division of the Black Beast Army, in an instant. Why did he kill Dark Baron? Just as the surrounding people fell into a strange silence, Zhuowen had already taken out the Supreme Dragon Cauldron. He then formed a seal, and suddenly, the Supreme Dragon Cauldron emitted a dazzling light, and a terrifying dragon's roar was heard. A huge dragon's power drilled out one by one. A total of 81 draconic powers were revealed. Kill them all. Zhuowen waved his right hand. Suddenly, 81 draconic powers roared towards the sky and rushed towards the guards and the Black Beast Army, who were still in a daze. Ah, ah, ah. Screams were heard continuously. Whether it was the guards or the Black Beast Army, they were all defeated by the draconic powers. They were all killed in an instant. Thud, thud, thud. The commotion caused by the draconic powers was too great. Suddenly, Zhuowen could hear orderly footsteps coming from above the dungeon. They were rushing towards the 10th floor at an extremely fast speed. Zhuowen's eyes flashed. He was extremely calm at this moment. With a wave of his right hand, the fire of the sun gushed out and burned all the corpses on the 10th floor to ashes. Then, Zhuowen took a step forward and arrived at the prison on the 10th floor. Ding, ding, ding. Without hesitation, Zhuowen opened all the cages in the prison and released the prisoners on the 10th floor. There were many prisoners on the 10th floor who were quite powerful. Most of them were at the ultimate 8-wheel Emperor realm and above. The stronger ones were even at the initial stage of the Xuanzuan realm. Moreover, there were many of them. There were probably hundreds of them. With so many powerful prisoners, it was enough to create a big commotion in the Imperial City dungeon. Thank you, brother. Thank you. After these prisoners were released, they all cupped their hands gratefully towards Zhuowen. Then, they took a step forward and flew towards the top of the dungeon. They wanted to leave the Imperial City dungeon completely. Chapter 853. Arriving at the 17th level. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of heavy objects falling to the ground could be heard. The prisoners who were trying to escape the dungeon did not manage to get far before they were thrown into the hall of the 10th level. Bang, bang, bang. The sound of footsteps finally reached the 10th level of the dungeon. Then, 3 Black Beast Army troops led by 3 men in black armor walked into the hall. The 3 Black Beast armies were the 1st, 3rd, and 4th squads respectively. The 3 men in black armor were the captains of the 3 squads. Their names were He Yao, He Yu and He Shi, and they were all golden venerables. Among the 3 of them, the most powerful one was undoubtedly the captain of the first team, He Yao. His cultivation was the highest among the 4 captains, and he should be at the later stage of the golden honored realm. At that moment, He Yao stared coldly at the prisoners in front of him and said coldly, "Who let you out? Where are the guards of the 10th level, and the 2nd team of the Black Beast Army troops? Damn dungeon, damn Emperor Qing. Now that we have finally been released, you dare to stop us? Die." Although the strength of the Black Beast Army in front of them was terrifying, the eyes of the prisoners who were beaten back were filled with madness. They had been trapped in the dungeon for so long that they had almost forgotten what the outside world was like. This kind of life was worse than death. Even though they knew that the Black Beast Army was powerful, they were still fearless of death and longed for freedom. After being trapped in the dungeon for so long, life was no longer important to these prisoners who longed for freedom. Even if they had to die, they wanted to escape from the dungeon. Kill! Kill! The prisoners who had fallen to the ground had crazy looks in their eyes. They shouted and charged towards the Black Beast Army troops. "You are courting death. Kill all these prisoners." He Yao's eyes were cold as he waved his hand and said indifferently. The Black Beast Army behind him wore black armor. Their eyes were cold as they carried out He Yao's order without hesitation. They held their black spears and charged forward. Puffed! Puffed! Instantly, the 2 sides engaged in a fierce battle. Shouts of killing and the sound of blood splashing continuously rang out. Terrifying Yuan power even spread out in this prison that was not considered spacious, causing the space to become much more stagnant and heavy. Fresh blood, miserable cries, and the clanging sounds of weapons clashing continuously spread out in this narrow space, adding a trace of mournful feeling to the prison. It seems like these prisoners are quite powerful. Black Dazzling narrowed his eyes and opened his mouth, revealing a row of white teeth. Hey you, hey sure, attack with me. Let's kill these traitors. Saying that, Dark Light turned into an afterimage and joined the battle. Hey you and Hey sure nodded. They followed Dark Light's lead and joined the battle as well. With the addition of Dark Light, and the other two, the battle immediately tilted towards the Black Beast army. The three of them were too powerful. The strongest prisoners were only from the Xuanzuan realm. They were no match for the three of them. In 10 breaths' time, the prisoners on the 10th level of the prison were basically wiped out by the Black Beast army. However, Dark Light did not show any joy because they still did not know who the enemy was. They had not even seen the enemy's face. Boss Dark Light. The person who broke in this time might be Zhuowen, whom Emperor Qing wants to catch. This boy is not simple. Why don't we report this to the 5 holy masters? He Shi frowned and suddenly said. Dark Light shook his head and said, no need. Zhuowen is just a mere holy master. There is no need to ask the holy masters for help. Moreover, Emperor Qing's worries are groundless. Although Zhuowen is not simple, it is not enough for the holy masters to take action. Our Black Beast army is enough. However, this boy's concealment ability is very strong. He was actually able to enter the 10th level of the prison without being discovered. In fact, Dark Light did not put Zhuowen in his eyes at all. However, Zhuowen's strange concealment ability gave him a headache. Even now, he still could not find Zhuowen's shadow. However, the 10th level of the prison is already in chaos. Moreover, everyone is in a panic. If we don't inform the holy masters, will he blame us? Heiyu asked worriedly. Dark Light shook his head and said, that Zhuowen is just a junior. Are you afraid? Moreover, if we can directly capture that Zhuowen, it will be a great merit. If we are captured by the holy masters, I'm afraid we won't even be able to drink the soup. Hearing Dark Light's words, how could Heiyu and He Shi not know what Dark Light was thinking at this moment? He probably wanted to take all the credit for himself. However, such a temptation was indeed unbearable for them. From Emperor Qing's actions, it could be seen that they valued Zhuowen far more than they had expected. If their Black Beast army could capture Zhuowen, Emperor Qing would not be stingy with their rewards. Who is it? Just as Heiyu and He Shi were about to make a move because of Dark Light's idea, Dark Light suddenly turned his head and shouted towards the depths of the prison. The two of them were shocked and quickly turned their heads to look. From within the gloomy prison, a staggering figure slowly walked out. In the end, he arrived before the three of them. Black Jew? Looking at the figure that appeared in front of the three of them, their expressions changed from vigilance to surprise. The figure that appeared in front of them was the leader of the second squad, Dark Jew. At this moment, Dark Jew's entire body was covered in wounds. There was even a trace of blood at the corner of his mouth. His footsteps were weak, as if he could be blown away by the wind. Black Jew, why are you in such a sorry state? What happened in the 10th floor of the dungeon? Heiyu and He Shi quickly stepped forward to support Dark Jew, while Dark Light came to Dark Jew and asked with a frown. Dark Jew shook his head and sighed. The person who broke into the dungeon has appeared. He is very strong and terrifying. The Dark Jew in front of them was obviously Zhuowen in disguise. At this moment, Zhuowen was very good at pretending and told them everything that had happened. Of course, the truth was naturally made up by him. What? The second squad was annihilated? Even you were almost killed. Dark Light, Heiyu, and He Shi were shocked when they heard Dark Jew's story. They did not expect the second squad of the Black Beast army to be annihilated. Only Dark Jew was left. This person should be Zhuowen. I didn't expect him to be so strong. Even Dark Jew was seriously injured by him. Dark Light frowned slightly. After listening to Dark Jew's story, he no longer underestimated Zhuowen. He knew that the latter was quite a difficult opponent to deal with. Brother Dark Light, what should we do now? Heiyu and He Shi looked at Dark Light and asked. After thinking for a moment, Dark Light said, since Zhuowen is strong enough to injure Dark Jew and has a powerful hiding ability, it will be difficult for us to capture him alive. Dark Light paused for a moment and continued, how about this? Dark Ju is seriously injured now. He needs to recuperate. Hey, sure. Bring Dark Ju to the 17th floor of the dungeon and inform Sky Lord about this matter. Also, let Dark Ju go to the 17th floor to recuperate. Dark Ju's eyebrows trembled slightly when he heard Dark Light's arrangement, but he quickly calmed down. Dark Light and the other two did not notice the abnormality that Dark Ju showed just now. Okay, then I will bring Dark Ju to the 17th floor of the dungeon to look for Sky Lord. He sure nodded and came to Dark Ju's side to help him up. You two go first. Hey, you and I will continue to patrol these floors. Maybe we can find Zhuowen's trace. Dark Light nodded to Dark Ju and He sure. He then led He Yu and the Black Beast army to search the dungeon above. They knew very well that Zhuowen's target was Lu Hantian on the 17th floor. If the Lu Hantian was not rescued, Zhuowen would not leave the dungeon so easily. Therefore, they were not worried that Zhuowen would escape from the dungeon. After Dark Light and He Yu left, He sure supported Dark Ju and said, let's go as well. We need to reach the 17th floor as soon as possible, so that Sky Lord can make his move. At that time, Zhuowen will not be able to escape. Yes, once Sky Lord makes his move, Zhuowen will have nowhere to run. Dark Ju replied in a low voice. He then followed He sure in silence. However, he was very happy. It seemed that he had made the right choice to disguise himself as Dark Ju. Because of Dark Light's words, he did not need to waste any energy and vigilance to reach the 17th floor of the dungeon. Looking at the silent Dark Ju, He sure's eyes flashed and revealed a trace of doubt. He always felt that Dark Ju was a little strange today. Usually Dark Ju was very talkative. He was the most active one among the four of them. But today, Dark Ju was very quiet, which naturally aroused He sure's suspicion. However, thinking that Dark Ju was seriously injured, He sure's heart was relieved. Perhaps Dark Ju was so depressed because of his injuries. Along the way, the two did not talk much. He sure silently led the way while Zhuowen followed behind him. Zhuowen's attention was always on the surrounding environment. As they went deeper into the dungeon, Zhuowen's face became gloomy. He found that after the 10th floor, the Imperial City's dungeon was heavily guarded. Even he felt a little cold. Even with the help of the 100 transformation technique, Zhuowen had doubts about himself. He wondered if he could successfully sneak into the 17th floor of the dungeon in such a heavily guarded environment. After passing through many corridors and doors, the two finally reached the exit of the 16th floor and arrived at the 17th floor. Chapter 854. Search in this vast world of ice. There were 4 air cages made of solid ice that deeply attracted Zhuowen's attention. A figure sat in each of the 4 cages. These figures were wrapped in black chains at the same time. Clearly, they were the prisoners of the 17th floor. Moreover, these 4 people faintly exuded an extremely powerful aura. Although they were imprisoned in the ice and snow cage, the pressure generated by their breathing could always sweep up a terrifying whirlpool. The 4 of them were all Empyrean exalts, and they were extremely powerful existences among Empyrean exalts. Originally, the 4 of them should have been existences that could call the wind and summon the rain in the outside world. But now, they had been thrown into the dungeon and were living the life of a prisoner. As Zhuowen swept his gaze across the cages, his gaze quickly fixed on a cage in the sky to the west. Within it, a ragged figure was silently sitting cross-legged with his eyes slightly closed. After seeing this figure, Zhuowen's body trembled unnoticeably. Soon after, he forced himself to calm down. Needless to say, this ragged figure was Zhuowen's target this time, Lu Hantian. In this world of ice and snow, apart from the 4 cages floating in the air, the most eye-catching thing was a pit that was several dozen meters wide at the very center of the space. The pit was pitch black and bottomless, as if it led to the deepest abyss of the earth. It was deep and mysterious. Swish! A figure suddenly emerged from the surrounding ice and snow, appearing before He sure and Zhuowen. A pair of cold eyes stared fixedly at the two of them. He said, "Why have you come to the 17th floor? Didn't we say that if there's nothing important, "Don't trespass here?" The man who had just appeared had long black and white hair. His eyebrows were as white as snow. He was the Emperorian White Brow who had chased after Zhuowen in the imperial capital. He hurriedly bowed respectfully and said carefully, "Lord White Brow, even if you gave me 100 times the courage, we wouldn't dare to trespass here. However, we do have something important to report this time." Seeing Blackstone say it in all seriousness, Emperorian White Brow nodded his head and said with a snort, "Tell me about it. If it's not important enough, you know the consequences." I know. Right now, the first 10 floors of the dungeon are already in chaos. This lowly one suspects that someone has already infiltrated our dungeon, and this chaos is caused by this infiltrator." At this point, Blackstone's gaze turned serious. "Oh, did someone sneak in? Is it Zhuowen?" White Brow Heavenly Exalt's eyes narrowed when he heard this, and he hurriedly asked. Blackstone said bitterly, "My cultivation base is low, and Zhuowen's concealment ability is terrifying. That's why we still haven't found that person's real location. It's just a guess." The first 10 levels of the underground prison are in a mess, yet you haven't even seen a shadow of a person. Your Black Beast army is truly a bunch of trash. The White Brow Heavenly Venerate said somewhat coldly. Blackstone's expression changed slightly, but he didn't dare to refute the White Brow Heavenly Venerate. He could only brace himself and say, "Forgive me for being incompetent, but Zhuowen's concealment technique is extremely brilliant. With our strength, it's simply a fool's dream to catch him. That's why we've come to ask for your help." The White Brow Heavenly Venerate snorted coldly and waved his right hand. Suddenly, a rather strange and ear-piercing sound resounded in this space. Bang, 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 bang. 4 figures appeared from different directions and landed where the White Brow Heavenly Venerate was. The aura of these 4 people was extremely powerful, and the White Brow Heavenly Venerate was slightly weaker compared to these 4 people. Needless to say, these 4 people were the other 4 Heavenly Venerates of the Imperial family. Among them, a middle-aged man in a purple robe was the strongest of the 5 Heavenly Venerates, Ziyang Tianzuan. Ziyang Tianzuan's eyes were purple, and he looked exceptionally strange. At this moment, Ziyang Tianzuan directly ignored Blackstone and Zhuowen. Instead, he looked at the White Brow Heavenly Venerate and asked, "White Brow, what happened?" In front of Ziyang Tianzuan, the arrogance on the White Brow Heavenly Venerate's face was greatly restrained. At this moment, he hurriedly cupped his hands and said, "Ziyang Tianzuan, the first 10 floors of the dungeon have become chaotic, as if someone has broken into the dungeon and caused chaos." What happened?" Ziyang Tianzuan narrowed his eyes and asked without batting an eyelid. The White Brow Heavenly Venerate did not hide anything and repeated what Blackstone had just said. Ziyang Tianzuan and the other 3 frowned when they heard this. "Someone has already broken into the 10th floor of the dungeon, yet you haven't even seen the enemy's true face. Your Black Beast army is getting more and more outrageous." Ziyang Tianzuan's voice also became cold. His demonic gaze indifferently glanced at Blackstone and Zhuowen, his face full of displeasure. Blackstone and Zhuowen hurriedly lowered their heads, not daring to say anything. The 5 people in front of them had a special status in the Imperial family, and the leader of their Black Beast army was indeed inferior to them, so they did not dare to refute. "Forget it. White Brow, go to the first 10 floors of the dungeon and inspect them. With your strength and perception, you should be able to detect Zhuowen's tracks." Ziyang Tianzuan turned his head and said to the White Brow Heavenly Venerate, "Ziyang Tianzuan, don't worry. I will definitely capture that Zhuowen and bring him to you." The White Brow Heavenly Venerate seemed to have a card up his sleeve as he patted his chest and said, Then you go." Empyrean Purple Sun nodded and said. Hearing this, the White Brow Heavenly Venerate no longer hesitated. With a step, he left the ice and snow space and rushed towards the top of the dungeon. Once the White Brow Heavenly Venerate left, Ziyang Tianzuan and the other 3 looked at each other, then quietly floated in the air. They sat cross-legged and began to meditate silently. They completely ignored Blackstone and Zhuowen. Seeing the 4 Empyreans' ignoring attitude, Blackstone did not care. Instead, he said to Zhuowen beside him, Black Noble. For the time being, you should rest and recuperate on the 17th floor. This place is guarded by the Empyreans, so it is safe enough. Zhuowen nodded, a look of gratitude on his face as he said, Black Stone, thank you so much for this time. Black Stone waved his hand and gave Zhuowen a few words of advice before leaving the ice and snow space. After all, the Black Beast army under his command was still in the dungeon above. If he left for too long, they would be in a situation where they would be leaderless. Looking at Black Stone's departing figure, Zhuowen's eyes flickered. He stared at the 4 Empyreans floating in the air with some fear, as he silently sat on the ground. Zhuowen naturally did not sit on the ground to cultivate. Instead, he sank his mind into his sea of consciousness and carefully communicated with it. After Zhuowen sat down cross-legged, Zhang Tianzuan, who was floating in the air, glanced indifferently at Zhuowen. His eyes revealed a trace of contemplation. Then he closed his eyes again and ignored Zhuowen. Xiaohei, if I want to send a message to Big Brother Hantian and inform him of my true identity, will it work? Zhuowen asked. Then you are courting death. Now that the 4 Empyreans are above you, if you openly send a message to Lu Hantian, you will undoubtedly be courting death and exposing your identity, Xiaohei said solemnly. Upon hearing this, Zhuowen nodded. Empyreans were much stronger than him. If he used a message in front of them, the chances of him being exposed were too great. The gains did not make up for the losses. However, what made him feel rather helpless was that the 4 Empyreans had all appeared in this ice and snow space. He did not dare to act rashly. After all, if he made any strange movements, it was very likely that he would be discovered by the 4 Empyreans. At that time, there would be no way for him to escape. Let's wait and see. You are no longer in the first 10 levels of the dungeon. No matter how hard Empyrean Whitebrow looks, it is unlikely that he will be able to find you. When Empyrean Whitebrow returns, perhaps the remaining Empyreans will not be able to hold back, and will also make a move. Xiaohei shook his head and said. Upon hearing this, Zhuowen could only agree with Xiaohei. What he needed to do now was not to act rashly, but to wait patiently for the best opportunity. Thinking of this, Zhuowen no longer let his imagination run wild. Instead, he closed his eyes and began to silently meditate and cultivate. Sure enough, after about half an incense stick of time, Empyrean Whitebrow returned. His expression was slightly ugly, and even a little unlucky. The arrival of Empyrean Whitebrow naturally attracted the attention of Zhang Tianzuan and the other 3. Zhang Tianzuan hurriedly asked, Whitebrow, how is the progress? Did you find Zhuowen? Empyrean Whitebrow's expression became even more unsightly. After ridiculing for a while, Empyrean Whitebrow helplessly said, Zhuowen's concealment ability is indeed very strong. I searched above for half an incense stick of time, and almost searched every corner of the first 10 levels of the dungeon, but did not find anything. You actually didn't find anything? Zhang Tianzuan asked in disbelief. Indeed, I didn't find anything. Empyrean Whitebrow shrugged helplessly. Zhang Tianzuan, then what should we do now? His Majesty Emperor Qing attaches great importance to Zhuowen. Now that this child has broken in, are we just going to sit here and wait for death? The only female Empyrean of the 5, Empyrean Sunset Moon, suddenly asked. Zhang Tianzuan frowned slightly. It seemed that they had underestimated Zhuowen. They did not expect the latter's concealment methods to be so good that even Empyrean Whitebrow could not find any trace of him for a while. After pondering for a moment, Zhang Tianzuan said coldly, Let's go. Let's go to the first 10 floors of the dungeon to take a look. I don't believe that we can't find a little junior from the Xuanzuan realm with all 5 of us here. Zhang Tianzuan, if the 5 of us go up together, there will be no one guarding the 17th floor of the dungeon. If Zhuowen takes advantage of the situation and enters this place, it will be terrible. The yellow-haired Empyrean Yellow Necklace suddenly suggested. Then let Whitebrow stay. The 4 of us will go up together to take a look. I don't believe that with our 4 great Empyreans' abilities, we still can't find that Zhuowen. Empyrean Purple Sun said decisively. When Empyrean Whitebrow heard this, his eyes were full of helplessness. He knew that after Empyrean Yellow Necklace made this suggestion, Jiang Tianzuan would let him stay. However, he did not care. After all, he was the weakest among the 5 of them. Moreover, he did not find any trace of Zhuowen, so he did not complain about Jiang Tianzuan's arrangement. Chapter 855. Waiting for 2 days soon. Only Empyrean Master Whitebrow, Zhuowen, and the other 4 Empyrean prisoners were left in this space. Empyrean Master Whitebrow was rather depressed at this moment. He had gone out with great ambition, thinking that he could find Zhuowen and capture him in one fell swoop. He did not expect to return empty-handed. Although Jiang Tianzuan and the others did not say anything, they knew that the other 4 Empyreans were somewhat dissatisfied with him from the fact that Jiang Tianzuan had left him alone on the 17th level of the dungeon. Landing not far away from Zhuowen, Empyrean Lord Whitebrow waved his sleeve. Instantly, terrifying origin energy formed a shockwave that blasted Zhuowen's body, causing Zhuowen to involuntarily retreat dozens of meters before barely stabilizing himself. "Scram! Don't stay in front of me. You're an eyesore," Empyrean Master Whitebrow said coldly to Zhuowen. Zhuowen did not expect that Empyrean Whitebrow would suddenly vent his anger on him. He was thrown into an extremely sorry state by this wave of air. He stopped a dozen meters away and stared at Empyrean Whitebrow with narrowed eyes. "What? You're not convinced?" Empyrean Master Whitebrow stared coldly at Zhuowen. Taking a deep breath, Zhuowen cupped his hands and said, "No, I accidentally offended you, Master Whitebrow. It's only right for you to teach me a lesson." With that, Zhuowen quietly found an inconspicuous corner and sat down cross-legged. Empyrean Master Whitebrow glanced indifferently at Zhuowen and ignored him. Instead, he waved his sleeve and left the open space, returning to the stronghold cave where he had been in seclusion. Seeing that Empyrean Master Whitebrow had returned to the stronghold cave, Zhuowen, who was sitting cross-legged in the corner, revealed a glimmer of light in his eyes. "Xiaohei, Empyrean Master Whitebrow has entered the stronghold cave. If I use a voice transmission now, he shouldn't be able to detect it, right?" Zhuowen asked Xiaohei cautiously. "Sure. However, after 10 breaths of time, Heavenly Venerable Whitebrow will have just entered the cave. I'm afraid he won't be able to enter a meditative state so quickly," Xiaohei said calmly. Nodding, Zhuowen was not in a hurry to send a voice transmission. Instead, he waited for 10 breaths of time. When he saw that the Whitebrow Heavenly Master had completely stopped moving after entering the stronghold cave, Zhuowen's eyes flashed. He flicked his finger, and an imperceptible white light shot toward the cage Lu Hantian was in. Inside the cage, Lu Hantian silently sat cross-legged with his eyes slightly closed. However, he soon sensed something strange and slowly opened his eyes. Immediately, he saw that there was a faint white light in the cage. This is..." Lu Hantian's eyes revealed a trace of doubt. He looked around and found that the other 3 celestial venerables in the other 3 floating cages had no reaction at all. They sat in their cages like dead people, not moving at all. Other than the 3 celestial venerables, who were also prisoners, there was only the unfamiliar man in black armor below. Could this thing be passed on to me by this person? Lu Hantian naturally recognized the armor on this man's body. It was the symbol of the Black Beast Army that guarded the Imperial City's dungeon. However, what he couldn't understand was why this person, who was clearly the captain of the Black Beast Army, would pass on this mass of light. And what was inside this mass of light? Lu Hantian's eyes flashed as he finally accepted this mass of light. Then, a familiar voice drilled into his mind from the mass of light. "Big Brother Hantian, I am Zhuowen, the captain of the Black Beast Army, Black Noble. Is me in disguise?" Hearing this familiar voice, Lu Hantian was stunned. After regaining his composure, Lu Hantian's eyes lit up. It was Zhuowen. This voice really did belong to Zhuowen. Moreover, the captain of the Black Beast Army wouldn't be so bored as to pretend to be Zhuowen's voice to deceive him. There was no need for that at all. Thus, he directly believed that this person was Zhuowen. Zhuowen actually didn't die. At this moment, Lu Hantian's heart was exceptionally excited. When Zhuowen had fallen into the dragon vein, Lu Hantian had been captured by Emperor Qing and imprisoned on the 17th floor of the imperial city's dungeon. Thus, he didn't know anything about what Zhuowen had done in Muqing County after leaving the dragon vein. After calming down, Lu Hantian was still somewhat worried. Are you really Zhuowen? What do you have to prove your identity? Although this voice was indeed Zhuowen's, Lu Hantian still acted extremely cautiously. Could it be that big brother Hantian has forgotten what happened to the two of us in the land of the blood demon? Zhuowen didn't feel the slightest bit of dissatisfaction because of Lu Hantian's doubts. Instead, he calmly told him everything that had happened in the land of the blood demon. After listening to Zhuowen's narration, Lu Hantian nodded. His heart became even more excited. The black-armored man in front of him was indeed going to kill Zhuowen. What had happened in the land of the blood demon was indeed only known to him and Zhuowen. After all, the two of them had met in the land of the blood demon and had become close friends. Moreover, this person's narration was extremely detailed. Apart from Zhuowen, Lu Hantian found it hard to believe that anyone else would know about these relatively secretive matters. After confirming Zhuowen's identity, Lu Hantian frowned slightly and said with some displeasure, Zhuowen, this imperial city's dungeon is too dangerous. It's really inappropriate for you to barge in alone. If you're discovered by the 5 great Empyreans, you'll really be in trouble. Brother Hantian, don't worry. If I can rescue you, I can use your strength to release the prisoners in the dungeon and completely muddy the waters in the imperial city's dungeon. The two of us can use this kind of human wave tactic to escape. Once we escape from the dungeon, Elder Shiwan and Moyan Wushang will come to our rescue. At that time, even if Emperor Qing comes personally, he may not be able to stop us. Zhuowen's voice was filled with confidence. He had already discussed this plan with Moyan Wushang and Elder Shiwan for a long time. At this moment, he seemed to have a well-thought-out plan. Lu Hantian shook his head and said, Emperor Qing is not as simple as you think. If Emperor Qing really takes action, the chances of us escaping are very slim. After hearing Lu Hantian's words, Zhuowen frowned. Previously, Elder Shiwan had also said that Emperor Qing was hiding his strength. Now even Lu Hantian had said the same thing. Could Emperor Qing really be so terrifying? Let's not talk about this first. I'd better let you out first. Brother Hantian, do you know how to open this floating cage? Zhuowen asked in a deep voice. Lu Hantian said helplessly. The 17th floor and the 18th floor below were sealed in ice by Emperor Qing himself. Especially the cage that trapped me. It is extremely sturdy. Experts at the peak of the Heavenly Master Realm will not be able to break it. If you want to break it, only experts at the Emperor Realm can do it. What? Only experts at the Emperor Realm can break it? Is this floating cage so terrifying? Hearing this, Zhuowen was shocked. Originally, Zhuowen thought that if he could transform into the Dragon Man state, he might be able to break the floating cage with a full blow. However, now it seemed that it was simply a pipe dream. Even experts at the peak of the Heavenly Master Realm could not break the floating cage. Even if he transformed into the Dragon Man state, it would be difficult for him to break it. Then what should we do? Isn't it impossible to rescue you? Zhuowen asked with a frown. Haha, don't worry, I have my ways. You also know that I have been stuck at the peak of the Heavenly Master Realm for many years. Lu Hantian did not say much, but his eyes revealed a hint of pride. However, Zhuowen's eyes flashed. Although Lu Hantian did not finish his words, how could he not know that Lu Hantian had probably comprehended something and was very likely about to break through to the Emperor Realm? How long will it take? Zhuowen asked in a low voice. 2 days is enough. At that time, I will be able to break through these shackles and completely escape from this floating cage. Lu Hantian revealed a hint of joy at the corner of his mouth. 2 days? Alright, then I'll wait for 2 more days. Zhuowen nodded and replied. Zhuowen, be careful for the next 2 days. Don't let them discover you. Otherwise, I won't be able to help you at all. I'll continue to cultivate first. After Lu Hantian finished speaking, his voice became intermittent and finally disappeared. Sensing the silence on the other end, Zhuowen gently stroked his right hand. The white ball of light in front of Lu Hantian slowly dissipated, as if it had never appeared. Then I'll wait for 2 more days. Zhuowen silently muttered this sentence, then closed his eyes and silently sat cross-legged. 2 days later, once Lu Hantian broke through, there was a very high chance that he would completely escape from the dungeon. At this moment, because the 4 heavenly masters had appeared on the first 10 floors of the dungeon, the chaos had gradually calmed down. However, Ziyang Tianzuan and the other 3 were not happy at all. This was because they had searched the first 10 floors of the dungeon several times, but they didn't find any suspicious places or people, let alone traces of Zhuowen. Ziyang Tianzuan, could it be that Zhuowen has already left the dungeon and escaped because he realized that something was wrong? Heavenly Master Shiyu said with a frown. Ziyang Tianzuan's eyes flickered as he said, His Majesty the Qing Emperor said that Zhuowen and Lu Hantian have a very deep friendship. Even if this is a dragon's lair or a tiger's den, Zhuowen will still barge in. He probably won't give up halfway like this. Now that the 4 of us have moved out, we haven't found any traces of Zhuowen at all. Is Zhuowen's concealment ability really that terrifying? Heavenly Master Shiyu said in disbelief. Heavenly Master Huang Jiao suddenly said, Didn't they say that Zhuowen has a dragon soul in his body? The Blue Dragon Hall has many methods to detect dragon souls. If Prince Aoki comes to the dungeon with a dragon soul detector and searches floor by floor, then even if Zhuowen hides very well, I'm afraid that his true form will be revealed. Ziyang Tianzuan's eyes lit up when he heard this. He said, Heavenly Master Huang Jiao is right. It seems that we have all misunderstood and actually forgot that Zhuowen has a dragon soul in his body. I'll go to the Blue Dragon Hall and ask Prince Aoki to come here. With that, Ziyang Tianzuan did not wait for the others to speak. He turned into a purple shadow and disappeared from the dungeon. The purple shadow streaked across the sky, and Ziyang Tianzuan soon arrived at the Blue Dragon Hall. Ziyang Tianzuan did not encounter too many obstacles when he entered the hall. Aoki was still sitting on the throne in the hall. When he saw Ziyang Tianzuan arrive, he hurriedly stood up and greeted him. Ziyang Tianzuan, why have you come? Chapter 856. Black and White Detection Dragon. What? That Zhuowen broke into the Imperial City's dungeon so quickly? Could it be that you 5 heavenly sovereigns couldn't catch that Zhuowen? Aoki was shocked at first, but soon after, he asked in confusion. He was very clear about the layout of the Imperial City's dungeon. Even if he broke in, it would be extremely difficult for him to escape. That Zhuowen was only a cultivator from the Xuanzuan realm. How could the 5 heavenly sovereigns not be able to do anything to him? Ziyang Tianzuan shook his head and gave a simple account of what happened in the Imperial City's dungeon. Aoki nodded and said, So that's how it is. Even you 5 heavenly sovereigns couldn't detect that kid's location. It seems that his concealment ability is really terrifying. After pondering for a moment, Aoki continued, The Dragon Soul detection device has already been damaged. I'm afraid it can no longer be used. Ziyang Tianzuan's eyes flickered as he said with a smile, Your Azure Dragon Subhall is a super faction second only to the Imperial family. I believe that you have more than one method of detecting dragon souls in your hands, right? Aoki smiled and said, Of course. The 2 great elders of our sub-hall practice extremely special cultivation methods. If a dragon soul cultivator is within 100 meters of them, they can sense it. I can bring the 2 great elders to your dungeon. If the one who broke into the dungeon is really Zhuowen, then he won't be able to escape even if he grows wings. Ziyang Tianzuan was ecstatic when he heard this and hurriedly said, Then I'll have to trouble you, Prince Aoki. Aoki waved his hand and said, That Zhuowen killed many experts of my Azure Dragon sub-hall. I've long wanted to settle this score with him. Ziyang Tianzuan, please wait for a moment. I'll go invite the 2 great elders. With that, Aoki went deep into the hall, and his figure disappeared into the darkness. After about half an hour, Aoki stepped out from the depths of the hall. Behind him, 2 old men with surging auras followed. The 2 old men were dressed in black and white robes respectively, one black and one white. Standing behind Aoki, they looked rather unique. Ziyang Tianzuan looked meaningfully at the black and white behind Aoki. The cultivation of these two old men were not weak. Although they had not reached the peak of the heavenly sovereign realm, they were very close. In other words, the two old men should be late-stage Empyrean realm powerhouses. Coupled with Qing Mu, who was a peak Empyrean realm powerhouse, the combined combat strength of the three of them was probably not weaker than the combined combat strength of the 5 Empyreans of the Imperial family. If the Imperial family did not have Emperor Qing, the Azure Dragon subsidiary palace might be able to confront the Imperial family head-on. Unfortunately, with Emperor Qing, the Azure Dragon subsidiary palace would always be suppressed. Xiang Tianzuan, let's go. Aoki came to Xiang Tianzuan's side and said with a faint smile. Xiang Tianzuan nodded and left the Blue Dragon Hall. Aoki followed closely behind with the black and white. His eyes were full of coldness. This time, he would not let Zhuowen go. Although the Azure Emperor had stipulated that he could not kill Zhuowen, Aoki could still make Zhuowen suffer a fate worse than death. Whoosh! Soon, the 4 of them entered the Imperial City's dungeon. Outside the dungeon, the other 3 heavenly sovereigns were already waiting. The 3 of them were waiting at the entrance of the dungeon. Firstly, they were waiting for Empyrean Ziyang. Secondly, they were waiting to prevent Zhuowen from escaping. Prince Aoki, everything depends on you, Xiang Tianzuan said to Aoki. Qing Mu nodded in understanding. Immediately, he whispered a few words into the ears of the black and white elders behind him. After which, the black and white elders stepped forward. Their hands formed a seal as black and white chi was formed. They entwined with each other between the 2 of them, and actually transformed into a small black and white dragon that was a few feet in size. This is the black and white detection dragon. It's a secret technique used to detect dragon souls. Aoki explained to Xiang Tianzuan and the other 3 heavenly sovereigns with a faint smile. Black and White held the black and white detection dragon with both hands and slowly stepped into the dungeon's first floor. Aoki, Xiang Tianzuan, and the others silently followed behind Black and White. Their eyes revealed a trace of anticipation. If they could find Zhuowen, then everything would be a success. They would no longer have to stay in the Imperial City's dungeon with such a poor environment. Black and White searched very carefully and did not miss a single corner. After an hour, Black and White had inspected every corner of the first floor. He frowned slightly and shook his head at Aoki. Looks like he's not on the first floor. Let's continue to look. Aoki also understood Black and White's intention. He was not discouraged. The first floor of the dungeon was too exposed. It was obvious that Zhuowen was not hiding here. Xiang Tianzuan and the others also nodded. They also did not think that Zhuowen would be hiding on the first floor. They then silently followed behind Black and White and Aoki. At this moment, they placed all their hopes of finding Zhuowen on Black and White. Time passed minute by minute. Black and White searched very carefully and did not miss a single corner. After a day, they had only reached the 10th floor, but they didn't find anything. They even carefully searched the 10th floor several times, but they didn't find anything at all. The Black and White probe dragons didn't react at all. What's going on? We've already searched the 10th floor. Why haven't we found anything? Prince Aoki, can your Black and White detection dragon really detect Zhuowen's location? Xiang Tianzuan frowned slightly and asked doubtfully. Aoki's gaze gradually turned cold. He said, Xiang Tianzuan, this king hurriedly rushed from the Blue Dragon Hall to the Imperial City dungeon in order to capture Zhuowen. I can clearly tell you that this Black and White detection dragon has an extremely strong reaction to dragon soul cultivators. However, we've already searched the 10th floor, and there is no reaction at all. This can only mean that Zhuowen is not in this dungeon. Hearing Aoki's words, Xiang Tianzuan's expression turned slightly ugly. How could he not understand the meaning behind Aoki's words? Xiang Tianzuan was saying that Aoki was fooling him. The so-called intruder was not in the Imperial City dungeon at all. For a moment, Xiang Tianzuan and Aoki were in a deadlock. After a while, Xiang Tianzuan shook his head and said, Prince Aoki, I Xiang, will not deceive you at this juncture. Perhaps Zhuowen has already hidden below the 10th floor. Yes. The Imperial City dungeon has a total of 18 floors. We've only reached the 10th floor. There are still 8 floors below. Perhaps Zhuowen is hiding in the 8 floors below. Celestial Venerable Shiyu quickly came out to smooth things over. Aoki's eyes flickered. He nodded and said, "What Celestial Venerable Shiyu said makes sense. Let's continue down and take a look." With that, Aoki led Black and White to the 11th floor, while Ziyang Tianzuan followed behind Aoki with an ugly expression. In fact, Ziyang Tianzuan himself was a little uncertain whether Zhuowen was still in the Imperial City dungeon. After all, ever since the Celestial Venerables came out to investigate the dungeon, the intruder seemed to have evaporated into thin air. There was no trace of him at all. Logically speaking, no matter how good Zhuowen's concealment ability was, there would always be times when he made a mistake. It was impossible for there to be no clues at all. However, they were very careful in their investigation. Although they found some traces of fighting and the destruction of corpses, Zhuowen's traces had inexplicably disappeared. Starting from the 11th floor, Black and White searched even more carefully than before. Of course, it took a lot of time. By the time they reached the 16th floor, more than half a day had passed. It's already the 16th floor. If we go down further, we'll reach the 17th floor of the ice prison, where the 4 Celestial Venerables are imprisoned. When they reached the 16th floor, Ziyang Tianzuan's expression had become quite ugly. The others were not any better. They even guessed that Zhuowen had probably escaped from the dungeon long ago. The one with the worst expression was Aoki. He rushed over in a hurry and specially asked Black and White to use the Black and White detection dragons. However, the result was so cruel. They did not even find Zhuowen's shadow in the dungeon. Continue the investigation. Seeing Black and White look over, Aoki nodded with a dark expression. They had already checked the 16th floor. He would not give up halfway. 2 hours later, Black and White returned to Aoki's side. The Black and White detection dragons in their hands were still soft and did not react at all. Obviously, there was no dragon soul on the 16th floor. Slowly turning his head, Aoki stared coldly at Ziyang Tianzuan and said word by word, "Ziyang Tianzuan, I think you should give me an explanation for this situation." Ziyang Tianzuan's face was slightly pale. He sighed softly and said, "How about this? There's still the 17th floor of the ice prison. If we still can't find it in the ice prison, I'm willing to hand over my Ziyang cultivation technique, with both hands as an apology." Ziyang cultivation technique? Aoki was stunned at first. Then his eyes lit up. Ziyang cultivation technique was amazing. It was a top venerable rank armor skill with terrifying power. It was also Ziyang Tianzuan's life cultivation technique. Ziyang cultivation technique was the reason Ziyang Tianzuan cultivated to the peak of the Celestial Master Realm. His strength was even stronger than Aoki's. Since Ziyang Tianzuan is so sincere, Aoki will not be unreasonable. "I'll follow you to the 17th floor of the ice prison." Aoki cupped his hands and his expression eased a lot. Ziyang Tianzuan's expression was cold. He nodded and led Aoki and the others to the 17th floor of the ice prison. Aoki followed behind indifferently. In his opinion, it was unlikely that Zhuowen would be able to hide in the ice prison. After all, the ice prison had been guarded by 5 celestial masters. Even if Zhuowen had great divine powers, it was impossible for him to hide in the ice prison without the 5 celestial masters knowing. On the other hand, Emperor Ziyang had an unlucky look on his face. In fact, he was only trying his luck, but he didn't have much hope in his heart. However, he was the one who invited Qingmu over after all. He couldn't possibly let Qingmu's efforts go to waste. Chapter 857. SS exposed. The black and white light on the body of the dragon became more and more dazzling. Eventually, the entire tunnel was filled with this strange black and white light. At the same time, the dragon's roar became louder and louder. At this moment, the dragon was extremely excited, as if it had found its favorite food. It roared continuously. The dragon is reacting? Aoki, who hadn't been paying much attention to it, said with a glint in his eyes. Ziyang Tianzuan and the other heavenly venerables' eyes were also filled with excitement. Since the dragon was reacting so strongly, Did that mean that Zhuowen might be hiding in the 17th level of the ice hell? However, what puzzled Ziyang Tianzuan was that the ice hell had always been guarded by the heavenly venerables. Even if the 4 heavenly venerables had left, wasn't heavenly venerate Whitebrow still there? Could it be that even heavenly venerate Whitebrow couldn't detect Zhuowen's presence? Although they were filled with doubts, they were more interested in finding out where exactly Zhuowen was hiding in the ice hell. After searching for so long, such a large group of heavenly venerables had yet to find any trace of Zhuowen. Ziyang Tianzuan and the other heavenly venerables had been suppressing their anger for a long time. Let's go. Let's enter the ice hell. Ziyang Tianzuan was the first to charge into the ice hell. The others followed closely behind Ziyang Tianzuan, unwilling to be outdone. The ice hell was still filled with white fog, and the cold air was oppressive and bone-chilling. The 4 ice cages hung silently in the air. Zhuowen sat quietly in a corner and looked up at Lu Hantian's cage. 2 days had passed and Lu Hantian had lived up to everyone's expectations. The withering qi in his body was gradually growing stronger. Now his qi had formed countless vortexes around him. Fortunately, Lu Hantian was deliberately suppressing this aura. Since heavenly venerate Whitebrow was cultivating in the stronghold cave, it didn't attract heavenly venerate Whitebrow's attention. Looks like Lu Hantian is about to break through. However, the gap between the Emperor realm and the heavenly venerate realm is huge. I wonder if he can successfully advance. Xiao Hei's voice sounded in Zhuowen's mind. Lin Ming nodded. Ascending from Empyrean to Imperial authority was the most important watershed for a martial artist. The difference in strength between the two was like the difference between heaven and earth. If one really wanted to compare, the difference between Empyrean and Imperial authority was as great as the sum of all the realms before Empyrean. There was a saying in the heavenly venerate Emperor realm, Emperor realm. Emperor realm, Emperor realm, realm. I hope Brother Hantian. Zhuowen's Hei was Hei Hei's. To Hei's Luan. He I Hei goddess S. Hei Hei's Chun was. Ha Hei attention Lehman. He I attention attentions attention 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 attention. He. TT attention. Hey ISTTTT. S hey. Dang. Suddenly, a series of footsteps came from outside the ice prison. Zhuowen's eyes narrowed. He turned his head. What he saw made him curse inwardly. He quickly sat in a corner without saying a word. Ziyang Tianzuan was the first to step into the ice prison, followed by Heavenly Venerate Shi Yu, Heavenly Venerate Guanghan, and Heavenly Venerate Huang Jiao. What surprised Zhuowen even more was that behind the 4 Heavenly Venerates, Aoki and 2 old men in black and white robes followed them silently. The 2 old men were holding a palm-sized black and white dragon in their hands. At this moment, the little black and white dragon was staring at Zhuowen with shining eyes. It was as if Zhuowen was a delicious delicacy in the little dragon's eyes. Oh no, it's a black and white probe dragon. Boy, I'm afraid your identity will be exposed soon. Xiao Hei's voice suddenly changed, and she said worriedly. Zhuowen's eyes darkened. He naturally knew about the black and white probe dragon. It was also a method of probing a dragon's soul. He didn't expect Ziyang Tianzuan and the others to invite people from the Blue Dragon Hall to help search for Zhuowen. Zhuowen is in the ice prison. Black and white. You should be able to make Zhuowen completely reveal himself. Aoki said with a sinister smile. Black and white nodded, and immediately formed a seal with his left hand. He stared at the black and white probe dragon. Suddenly, the black and white light on the surface of the probe dragon became even more intense. Finally, with a deafening dragon roar, the probe dragon broke away from black and white's palm. Whoosh! The black and white probe dragon was extremely fast. After it broke away from the 2 elders' palms, it instantly shot out. Needless to say, its direction was where Zhuowen was. At this moment, Zhuowen's expression was extremely unsightly. The black and white probe dragon had indeed discovered him. Ziyang Tianzuan, Aoki, and the others also followed the trajectory of the black and white probe dragon and saw Zhuowen's location. They saw a cold man in black armor, sitting cross-legged in the corner. It was the Black Beast Army's 2nd Division Captain Black Baron. Who is this person? After discovering that the black and white probe dragon was flying towards a man in black armor that they had never seen before, the smile on Aoki's face faded. He turned to look at Xiang Tianzuan and asked, "This person is the Black Beast Army's 2nd Division Captain Black Baron. He is a capable general who guards the Imperial City's dungeon all year round. I would like to ask Prince Aoki if there is a problem with your black and white probe dragon. This person is a member of the Imperial family. How could he be Zhuowen, who broke into the dungeon?" Xiang Tianzuan's expression also became a little unsightly. He had already investigated the Black Baron in front of him. Whether it was his appearance or aura, he didn't seem to be a fake. So he had some doubts about the black and white probe dragon. Aoki coldly snorted and said, "The black and white probe dragon is extremely sensitive to dragon souls. Now that it is rushing towards Black Baron so actively, it goes without saying that the latter must have a dragon soul in his body. This person is probably Zhuowen in disguise." Xiang Tianzuan's voice was a little cold as he said, "Long before Black Baron entered the Ice Snow prison, this venerable had already investigated him. Whether it is his aura or appearance, this person is definitely not Zhuowen. If he is in disguise, it is impossible for there to be no traces at all." Whoosh! A figure suddenly shot out of the barrier cavern. It was the white-brow Heavenly Master, who had come out after noticing the commotion outside. "Xiang Tianzuan, have you found Zhuowen?" The white-brow Heavenly Master first looked at Aoki in confusion, then immediately asked Xiang Tianzuan. Xiang Tianzuan shook his head and said, "We haven't found him. I'm afraid that Zhuowen has already escaped from this dungeon." Hearing Xiang Tianzuan say so, the white-brow Heavenly Master felt a lot better. He hadn't been able to find Zhuowen before, and now Xiang Tianzuan was the same. At this moment, the black and white probe dragon had already arrived in front of Zhuowen. Its pair of dragon eyes stared at Zhuowen with great confusion. Just now, it had felt an extremely strong dragon soul aura from this person. Why did it suddenly disappear? Zhuowen was extremely nervous as he looked at the black and white probe dragon in front of him. The movements of the probe dragon had undoubtedly pushed Zhuowen to the forefront of the storm. If Xiang Tianzuan and the others found out that the black noble was a fake, then Zhuowen would really have no way out. After all, there were 8 heavenly venerates in front of him. It was simply impossible for him to escape from 8 heavenly venerates. Fortunately, Xiang Tianzuan's words made Zhuowen feel a lot more at ease. However, what Aoki said next once again made Zhuowen's heart jump to his throat. The heavenly armor continent is so huge. It's not like there aren't any secret techniques that can completely change one's aura. Perhaps Zhuowen obtained such a secret technique by chance? If Xiang Tianzuan really believes the Black Noble's words, then let him come over. Black and White has mastered a secret technique that can completely stimulate the dragon soul in a dragon soul martial artist's body. If the Black Noble doesn't have a dragon soul in his body, then this secret technique will naturally have no effect on him. If he does, At this point, Aoki's face became a little ferocious. Everyone knew that if there was a dragon soul, then the Black Noble in front of them was definitely a fake. Xiang Tianzuan's eyes flickered. Aoki's suggestion was undoubtedly the best. However, the Black Noble was, after all, personally appointed by the Qing Emperor to guard the dungeon. If they let the Black Noble come over just like that, it would undoubtedly disappoint the latter. "Xiang Tianzuan, he's just a captain of the Black Beast Army. Why do you care so much? I'll capture the Black Noble first and let Black and White examine him. If he doesn't have a dragon soul, then it'll be fine. If he does, then it'll be a great merit for us." Celestial Master Whitebrow said to Xiang Tianzuan, and strode toward Zhuowen. He was in the Celestial Master realm, while the Black Noble was only in the Golden Venerable realm. Celestial Master Whitebrow looked down on the Black Beast Army from the bottom of his heart. Therefore, he didn't care what the Black Noble thought. Xiang Tianzuan and the others didn't stop him. Instead, they silently watched Celestial Master Whitebrow's actions. Obviously, They tacitly agreed with Celestial Master Whitebrow's actions. Looking at Celestial Master Whitebrow striding over Zhang Tianzuan, and the others silently watching behind him, Zhuowen felt a chill in his heart. It seemed that they really intended to force Zhuowen to hand him over and let Black and White examine him. I can't sit still and wait for death. Zhuowen's eyes flashed. He knew very well that if he really followed Celestial Master Whitebrow to Black and White's side, his life would be completely in the hands of others. If Black and White's secret technique could really detect the dragon soul in Zhuowen's body, there was no doubt that Zhuowen would die. Even if it couldn't detect it, if Aoki was flustered and exasperated and used him as a venting bucket, then there was still a high chance that Zhuowen would die. As a member of the royal family, Celestial Master Whitebrow, is this how you treat your own people? Zhuowen took a deep breath and shouted coldly. At this moment, Celestial Master Whitebrow was already 10 meters away from Zhuowen. When he heard Zhuowen's words, he couldn't help but be stunned. Then he sneered and said, "Ridiculous. Who do you think you are? Are you qualified to be one of us? You think too highly of yourself. I'll only give you one chance. Come with me to be examined. If you can't detect the dragon soul, we won't make things difficult for you." Chapter 858. Lu Hantian's breakthrough. Are you planning to refuse the test? The Whitebrow Empyrean narrowed his eyes and revealed a cruel smile. To him, Heiju was just an ant-like existence, yet he dared to refuse in front of him. He really didn't know what was good for him. However, you have to go even if you don't want to. It's better for you to die. After coldly throwing down these words, the Whitebrow Empyrean suddenly slapped out with his right hand. Terrifying origin energy poured out and turned into a huge origin energy palm, wanting to capture Zhuowen completely. Zhuowen's gaze was ice cold. This Whitebrow Empyrean was truly shameless. He actually attacked the weak as he pleased. He didn't have the demeanor of an expert at all. With a wave of his right hand, Zhuowen immediately took out the Jade Cauldron Armor Soul. He released a terrifying dragon's might that soared into the sky and blasted towards the origin energy palm. Boom! A terrifying explosion resounded. Following that, the unstoppable origin energy palm actually froze in midair, unable to move at all. It actually formed a stalemate with the 81 dragon's might. You actually dare to resist? The Whitebrow Empyrean narrowed his eyes and snorted coldly. He pressed down with his right hand again, and the power of the origin energy palm increased by several times. Its aura was terrifying, and it actually completely suppressed the 81 dragon's might. Zhuowen narrowed his eyes and flicked his finger. Immediately, the divine sun cauldron slowly appeared from the void behind him. Soon after, the sun runes on the surface of the divine sun cauldron lit up. Waves of sunfire burst out and swept towards the origin energy palm like fire dragons. In an instant, the dragon's might and the sun's fire complemented each other, and their power increased explosively. With a cracking sound, the Whitebrow Empyrean's origin energy palm was broken just like that. After breaking the origin energy palm, Zhuowen waved his right hand, and 81 dragon's might and sun's fire surrounded his body. He then retreated continuously as he stared at the Whitebrow Empyrean in front of him with fear. Back then, although Zhuowen had been powerless against the Whitebrow Celestial Sovereign, Zhuowen was only at the peak of the Xuanzuan realm at that time. Now, Zhuowen's cultivation had risen to the supreme realm, and his strength had increased by more than several times. The current Zhuowen might not be a match for the early-stage Heavenly Venerate Whitebrowed Heavenly Venerate, but Zhuowen was still able to block the palm formed by Heavenly Venerate Whitebrowed's casual strike. He was not as pathetic as before. Whitebrow Heavenly Sovereign was stunned. Even Zhang Tianzuan and the others who were standing in the distance fell into silence. This aura was already close to that of an Imperial Power Realm expert. They all knew that this person was probably going to break through here. Thinking of this, their gazes became much more fervent. If Lu Hantian really succeeded in breaking through, then he would be able to directly break through this ice cage. At that time, it wouldn't be difficult to let the three of them out. Oh no, that Lu Hantian is preparing to break through to the Imperial Power Realm. Damn it! We must go and stop him. Xiang Tianzuan's attention was also focused on Lu Hantian, who was in the center of the snowstorm. This terrifying snowstorm was too powerful. It was like the might of the heavens. Even Empyreans like them couldn't help but feel a sense of fear. With that, Xiang Tianzuan took the lead and used his movement technique. He rushed towards the sky and approached the terrifying snowstorm, wanting to stop the power of the snowstorm from spreading. In addition to Xiang Tianzuan, Empyrean Sunset Moon, Empyrean Huangjiao, and Empyrean Guanghan were also moved. They followed Xiang Tianzuan without hesitation and rushed into the sky. Aoki, what should we do? Black and White came to Aoki's side and asked in a deep voice. Let's go. We'll go help Xiang Tianzuan and the others. We can't let Lu Hantian successfully break through. Otherwise, the consequences will be unimaginable. Aoki's eyes flickered. He gave an order, then brought Black and White and rushed towards the snowstorm. If Lu Hantian really succeeded in breaking through, he would pose a great threat to both the Imperial family and the Blue Dragon Hall. Therefore, Aoki had to stop him. Empyrean White Brow frowned slightly, but he didn't move. Instead, he stared at Zhuowen and said, "Little bastard, you're going to die today." With that, Empyrean White Brow took a step forward and rushed towards Zhuowen. He released his Empyrean aura without hesitation, causing the surrounding space to collapse. Zhuowen looked at Lu Hantian worriedly. He didn't know if Lu Hantian could successfully break through with so many Empyreans joining forces to suppress him. However, Zhuowen soon noticed Empyrean White Brow. He cursed inwardly and turned to run. It seemed like Empyrean White Brow was targeting him. "Little bastard, let's see where you're going. Come back." Empyrean White Brow was very fast. He arrived above Zhuowen in an instant. With a clap of his right hand, two huge elemental energy palms condensed and pressed towards Zhuowen. Zhuowen no longer held back. He instantly grew 4 heads and 8 arms. He held the Divine Sun Cauldron in his left hand and the Supreme Dragon Cauldron in his right. Under the fusion of the flames of the sun, the 81 streaks of dragons might turned into an extremely terrifying fire dragon. Zhuowen did not hold back. He waved his 8 arms and used the Azura Blood Spear. Boom! The 2 huge elemental energy palms immediately collapsed under Zhuowen's resistance. However, Zhuowen didn't have it easy either. He groaned and retreated a dozen steps. His gaze was extremely gloomy. It's you." Empyrean White Brow narrowed his eyes as he looked at Zhuowen, who had grown 4 heads and 8 arms, and used the Azura Blood Spear. Wasn't this Black Noble the young man in white who had killed Huangfu Wudao? Although Zhuowen now had the appearance and aura of Black Noble, this kind of attack had left a deep impression on Empyrean White Brow. Therefore, this person was definitely not Black Noble, but the young man in white. "It seems that you are Zhuowen. I didn't expect that we, the 5 Empyreans, had always thought that you sneaked into the dungeon by relying on concealment techniques. I didn't expect you to be able to change your appearance and aura." Whitebrow Heavenly Master wasn't a fool. After seeing Zhuowen's move, he thought of many things. He knew that the Dark Baron in front of him was definitely a fake. The real Dark Baron had probably been killed by Zhuowen. "It seems that you're not stupid. You can actually think of me." Since he had been recognized, Zhuowen no longer hid it. The muscles on his face squirmed, and he immediately restored his original appearance. He stared at Empyrean White Brow cautiously. Sure enough, Empyrean White Brow snorted coldly and then shouted, "Xiang Tianzuan, this Black Noble is a fake. His real identity is the Zhuowen we're looking for." Empyrean White Brow's voice was very loud, like rolling thunder that resounded through the ice hell. At this moment, Xiang Tianzuan and the others naturally heard Empyrean White Brow's voice. They all lowered their heads and saw Zhuowen, who had restored his appearance. Unfortunately, the 7 of them had entered the snowstorm in order to prevent Lu Hantian from breaking through. The snowstorm was extremely terrifying, and the suction force it contained made it impossible for them to escape. They could only barely resist it. Even though they knew that Black Noble's real identity was Zhuowen, they were powerless. "White Brow, quickly capture Zhuowen and help us prevent Lu Hantian from breaking through." Ziyang Tianzuan made a prompt decision. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.